living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, no, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics, and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. You're with me at 3, Patrick Christys on GB News, and this is a seismic day. We are on Cabinet resignation watch, ladies and gentlemen. Home Secretary Suella Braverman might quit, according to sources, and Rishi Sunak could be about to lose the right wing of his party. Why? Well, because the rumours are that he wants to sign off on a deal that would essentially hand Northern Ireland over to the EU. But is it really that simple? Heavy-hitting Tory Brexiteers are meeting right now. Resignation letters potentially at the ready. It's a massive day for Sunak. Are right-wingers being ignored? Also, did the press go too far? Ofcom is massively concerned about Sky and ITV allegedly contacting Nicola Bulley's family after her body had been found, despite their pleas for privacy. Is this the return of the gutter press, or the media simply responding to massive public interest? The SNP leadership contest has kicked off big time. It's looking like Humza Yousaf is in pole position. We'll be taking a deep dive into his checkered past and also looking at why his main opponent has been slaughtered for her Christian values. Will Meghan Markle sue South Park for taking the mickey out of her and the artist formerly known as Prince Harry? Also, Prince Andrew, he's fallen on hard times, bless him. Well, today, I promise you, I will try to find Andy a job live on air. GB Views at gbnews.uk. I want to know from you right now, ladies and gents, is Rishi Sunak finished if Suella Braverman quits? GB Views at gbnews.uk. But right now, it's your headlines with the wonderful Tamsin Roberts.
Patrick, thanks very much and good afternoon from the GB Newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 3. The media regulator says it's extremely concerned by the actions of two broadcasters following comments made by Nicola Bulley's family. Both ITV and Sky contacted the 45-year-old's relatives after her body was discovered in the River Wire on Sunday, despite an appeal for privacy. Ofcom has written to both companies, asking them to explain their actions. Police are also being criticised over the way they've handled the case. Former Met Detective Peter Blexley told GB News the investigation has not been up to scratch.
They're going to have to take a very long, hard look at how they've conducted all of this, not only the investigation, but very much the communication. And I hope that the wider British police take some lessons from all of this, because quite frankly, if you get the messaging wrong and people don't believe you, they're not going to trust your investigations. And that, I think, is part of the reason why so many people turned up at St Michael's on Wye.
A former Conservative MP jailed for sexually assaulting a teenager has been freed from prison after serving half his term. Imran Ahmed Khan was jailed for 18 months last May for groping a 15-year-old boy after a party in 2008. The 49-year-old lost a Court of Appeal challenge against his conviction and sentence in December. The Foreign and Northern Ireland secretaries will hold fresh talks with the EU this afternoon on the protocol. Earlier, the Prime Minister told Cabinet intensive negotiations are continuing in a bid to resolve the outstanding issues. Rishi Sunak says 3 main areas are being addressed: safeguarding Northern Ireland's place within the Union, protecting the Belfast Agreement and ensuring the free flow of trade. Russia has issued a warning to the West by suspending its participation in a nuclear arms treaty with the US. Vladimir Putin made the announcement during a major speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power. Russia has now summoned the US ambassador over what it describes as an aggressive course set by Washington.
Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation. Before resuming the discussion of this treaty, we must first understand what do such countries of NATO, like France and Great Britain, aspire to do, and how will we take their strategic arsenals into account.
It comes as US President Joe Biden holds talks in Warsaw with his Polish counterpart a day after his surprise visit to Kyiv. They addressed security issues and increasing NATO's presence in Poland. President Biden is due to hold a news conference on the growing tensions with Russia this afternoon. The Turkey-Syria border has been hit by another earthquake and dozens of aftershocks. It comes just 2 weeks after huge tremors rocked the region, killing more than 47,000 people. The latest 6.4 magnitude quake has claimed at least 6 lives. Almost 300 people were injured. Founder of the Global Relief Trust, Shahida Rahman, says people are still shaken by the previous earthquake.
Tonight, in several cities, not only in Hatay, but also in neighboring cities such as Adana and Gaziantep, people rush to the oil stations to get petrol and gas to their cars, and they slept in their cars, or some of them even try to drive to outskirts of the cities or to other regions, safer regions, and aftershocks are still ongoing, unfortunately, in the region, and the trauma is still going on.
The UK's chief medical officer has criticised the marketing of vapes. Sir Chris Whitty says it's clear some products are designed to appeal to children, and he described the campaigns as appalling. Research published last July found the number of children vaping is increasing, with many being influenced by social media. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
OK, people, well, big noises about potential resignation letters at the ready, and I will tell you why in the Cabinet, because former Cabinet Minister Jacob Rees-Mogg has accused Rishi Sunak of imitating the failed Brexit strategy of his predecessor twice removed, Theresa May. There's reports the Prime Minister is now facing potential Cabinet resignations over the Northern Ireland Protocol. So the government's currently trying to hammer out a deal with EU leaders to get power sharing in Stormont up and running again. But it means the passage of the Northern Ireland Protocol bill, which, if passed, would allow the UK to unilaterally abandon parts of the EU withdrawal agreement. And it's been paused in Parliament. So there's been much of the disdain, really, of prominent Tory Brexiteers, because Boris Johnson has urged the PM to not abandon legislation. Look, I am not going to get bogged down, say, ladies and gentlemen, in the finer points of the Northern Ireland Protocol. Why? Because it is so dull, and we all hate it. It could bring a tear to a glass eye. But what I am concerned about is potential Cabinet resignations and whether or not Rishi Sunak is essentially going to biff pro-Brexit elements of his party. And would that be political suicide? I'm joined now by our political reporter, Olivia Utley. And Olivia, rumours that some people might go. Who?
Well, the rumours are, we were hearing this morning that there's a chance of Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, resigning. It doesn't sound like that is imminent at all, but she isn't happy with what she's heard of the deal. And just to reiterate that no one really knows what the deal is, because Rishi Sunak has kept it under wraps. He's had these meetings with the Northern Irish leaders, but he hasn't actually shown them the text of the deal. So he's trying to engage with them and with his own Conservative ministers and backbench MPs, just in sort of the vaguest, broadest possible terms, without getting into the detail. There were rumours that Chris Heaton-Harris, the Northern Ireland Secretary of State, was thinking of resigning. It doesn't look like he is. It says he is backing the government's deal, which makes sense. He's the one who's negotiating it. And the other name, which we keep hearing, is Steve Baker. Now, he isn't a Secretary of State level minister. He's a Minister of State for Northern Ireland, but he's a very influential figure in the Conservative Party. He was chairman of the ERG, that group of backbench Brexiteers who are extremely influential in 2016 to 2017, and he holds a lot of sway among the Brexiteers in the party. If Rishi Sunak were to lose him, that would be a very, very big blow indeed.
And what are the ERG saying about it now? Because they are really the kind of Brexit bigwigs in this party. They are the core, it could be argued, essentially hardline right-wing Eurosceptic element. Some would say that's the fabric and the DNA, to an extent, of the Conservative Party. Where are they on this?
Well, they're very worried indeed about it, and they have rode in completely behind the DUP. If anything, they're possibly taking a harder stance than the DUP. What they're worried about are these, not to go into too much detail because I know it is boring.
No, it's important to know what the row is actually about. I get that, yes.
So there are two things that they're worried about with what they know of the New Deal, and again, they don't exactly know what it is. But one is the continued jurisdiction of the European Courts of Justice over events that are taking place in Northern Ireland. So EU disputes happening in Northern Ireland would be subject to ECJ jurisdiction. So essentially, you would have foreign courts overseeing law being made in a part of the UK. And the other issue is this issue of customs checks on goods made in Northern Ireland coming into Great Britain would be subject to customs checks, which essentially means that Northern Ireland would still be, in all but name, part of the single market, which, again, would be very difficult difficult in principle generally, but practically difficult if UK law, which Brexit hope it will, starts to diverge from EU law, then it would be very difficult for manufacturers in Northern Ireland, for business people in Northern Ireland, to trade with people in their own country.
Exactly, but this is really the fascinating bit, because Rishi Sunak is keeping his cards incredibly close to his chest. He's doing a little bit what Theresa May did, a little bit about what David Cameron did when he first went to the EU and tried to get some form of renegotiated deal with them. But if he comes back and he goes, right, I want to sign off on this, and it means that Northern Ireland is still subject to the ECJ, and any goods coming out of Northern Ireland into Great Britain will be subject to customs checks, so i.e. Northern Ireland is essentially, in many ways, part of the European Union. We lose some of our sovereign territory, not really what Britain voted for. They voted for Brexit. If that does happen, realistically, the likes of Suella Braverman, I'm afraid, have to go, don't they?
Well, it'll be very interesting. I mean, it's thought that Rishi Sunak sort of wouldn't let it get that far, and his own MPs are now telling him that he would have to get the DUP on side before he went ahead with it. That said, he's had a meeting with his backbench MPs this afternoon, and it's being reported that he was very snappy in this meeting and irritable, and suggesting that he is now, the right wing of his party is now pushing him too hard and are risking electoral oblivion if they push him too hard. So it does sound a bit as though he's beginning to call their bluff and say, well, you shout me down all you like, but we will lose the election if you carry on doing this. So it has reached a bit of an impasse now.
It's fascinating, really, and I'm going to be having these discussions throughout the course of the show. Thank you for that, Olivia. Olivia Utley there, our political reporter. I'm going to have a series of guests, MPs, past and present, ministers past and present, actually, potentially, to discuss this, because, for me, it's more about the personality element of this, OK? Will there be cabinet resignations? If there are, who will go? Some big names potentially tipped, but we'll have to wait and see. But also just practically going forward, does Rishi Sunak ignore the right-wing elements of his party, and does he get propped up by Labour? And what would that look like? What would that mean for you? Do you feel as though Rishi Sunak would be dead in the water if he ignores right-wing Eurosceptic elements of his party, especially considering that he's, at the moment, not done too much about immigration, both illegal and legal. So GBViews at GBnews.uk. Keep your views coming in. We'll bring you updated on that. It's expected to be developments. But yes, the ERG, like I said, that right wing of the Tory party, very angry at Rishi Sunak. And, well, would they bring him down? We'll have to wait and see. But questions need to be answered, moving on now, about the case of Nicola Bulley, because the media watchdog, Ofcom, has expressed extreme concern about the actions of some media outlets after Nicola's family explicitly named certain broadcasters for contacting them when the news of a body being discovered first broke. And, of course, that was allegedly, anyway, Sky TV and ITV. And fingers have already been pointed at Lancashire Police as they begin to undertake their own internal investigation into their handling of the case after a huge public backlash was sparked over the decision to release sensitive details. Well, look, I've got a lot of questions on this, OK? This is clearly, as anyone who watches this show will know, a case that I have personally covered massively here on this particular channel, on this particular show, and it's always a difficult one to get right, and there's massive public interest in it. Huge public interest, and was huge public interest in the search for missing Nicola Bulley. And because there wasn't necessarily always a coherent message coming from the police, that can fuel speculation. But undoubtedly, the allegations from the family are that some media outlets went far too far. Joining me now for the policing perspective is former senior investigating officer at the Met. It's Peter Kirkham. Peter, thank you very, very much.
Good afternoon.
Did the police fuel the gutter press?
Perhaps by some of the things that they said, but not deliberately. It's really difficult to know, as an investigating officer, it's really difficult to know how what you're saying is going to be taken up by the media. Sometimes you have a press release that you think is going to really take off, and it hardly takes off at all. Other times you release something that appears to you...
Oh, I think we might have lost Peter. We might have lost Peter. It's all right, we'll try and get him back. Essentially, I know a lot of you at home and our viewers and our listeners and just the public in general had very, very mixed feelings about the Nicola Bulley press coverage. And this is kind of where I'm at on it, really, which was that it was a deeply troubling case and there were massive appeals for any information about the case, of course. And it really did grip the nation, I think, initially because of how mysterious it was. Yes, I think that the police's messaging at the start was bizarre, and that did fuel people to lead people down a route of going, well, is she in the river, is she not? And then that leads to massive, massive speculation. But at the same time, there is that huge public interest element of it. And you only have to look at when people talk about this particular case, ratings on news channels spike up. When you see that people put clips out on Twitter from people talking about this case, they get massively viewed online. And so it does fuel it in that sense, doesn't it? So there is undoubtedly the public interest element to it, which clearly allows the press and media to continue to talk about something. But there is the moral side of it, isn't there? And did the press, in some cases, go too far? And certainly that line that came out yesterday from the family, I was reporting on that live here. In fact, that press conference took place live on this show yesterday. That, for me, I thought was a signal of the press going too far, of some media outlets. They named Sky News and ITV, so they named them, and they said that they'd made contact with the family after the body was found, despite the family asking for privacy. So where's the line for you in all of this? Was that too far? Were you actually annoyed with the media coverage? And hey, if you think I got it wrong, let me know. GBViews at GBnews.uk. The reality is it was a massive case and remains a case of quite significant mystery, really. And maybe not everyone always got it right. Your views, GBViews at GBnews.uk. In fact, let's see what some of you actually think of the media's treatment now, because joining me are GB News viewers Lee Harris, who is in Bristol, and we've got Sue Cox as well in Felixstowe. Thank you very much, both of you. Great to have you on the show. Lee, the discussion today around this Nicola Bulley case is basically, have the press behaved like the gutter press? What's your view?
Yeah, I agreed with a lot of what you just said, actually. Yes, I think they have gone way too far. The coverage of this case has been appalling. The police, do have some serious questions to answer about how it was handled at the start, like you rightly pointed out. Some of the information they put out seemed very personal and completely unnecessary, that led to speculation. But Nicola Bulley's family were absolutely right to specifically call out Sky News and ITV Sky News have been particularly bad. They should hang their heads in shame. The so-called on-the-spot reporting was crass rubbernecking of the worst kind. It was embarrassing and uncomfortable to watch. It was a shameless scramble for advertising revenue and social media clicks. And you're right, gutter journalism. I personally found it quite awful watching Kay Burley retracing her steps and sensationalising this sad story. I know she's not here to defend herself. It's just my personal view. I watched it for about 5 minutes and I had to turn it off. I genuinely felt like I was invading the family's privacy just by watching it.
Well, look, those are strong views, Lee, and they're all certainly very welcome on this show. Again, just to emphasise, obviously, Sky, ITV, etc. may well have different views. That's fair enough. We'll leave that to them to pick through the mess there. But Sue Cox is in Felixstowe. Sue, thank you very much. I'll ask you the same question because there is and was a huge public interest in the Nicola Bulley disappearance. Did the press go too far, in your view, Sue?
I do think the press went too far, but I have to say I found this situation quite unusual in that 400 people more or less go missing every day, and a lot of those are children, and the press doesn't give them any attention. I think in this case, for the first couple of days, the media interest was because she was a relatively young mum with two very young children and was a very unlikely candidate to go missing. And I think the two pieces of evidence, i.e. the abandoned phone and dog, intrigued the press and also intrigued the public. And I think, for the first couple of days, it was very important for the press to focus on this, to get information from people that might have seen something or dash cams or such like. But I think once the media circus began, and it did turn into a media circus, I think everybody wanted to throw their hat into the ring because they wanted a scoop. I don't really think it was out of consideration for the family, because if it had have been, they wouldn't have behaved like that. And, I think it has drawn out some of the most evil examples of humanity, including journalists. Aside from the loss of this poor woman, there are two people that should have been protected at any cost. And as a grandmother, I just feel so sorry for those two little girls, because they would not have been able to be protected from this. It would be impossible for them not to know what was going on. And I think that, the press should, certain areas of the press and certain coverage, they should hang their heads in shame.
Well, look, both of you, thank you very much. Just stay where you are for me, if that's all right. My producer's going to keep you on the line. I'm going to bring Peter Kirkham back in, who's, of course, a former cop at the Met. Peter, thank you. Sorry, we lost you briefly there. Now, look, forgive me, and I certainly don't want anyone here to think that I am shilling for Kay Burley and co at Sky News or ITV for that matter, but I just want to ask your views on this particular thing. Is it quite useful now for the police, in the midst of what many are saying was not the best investigation and mistakes made, investigations will be done into the investigation, is it quite useful for them to now hide behind the press and make the press enemy number one? Oh, you were sick, you were calling the family afterwards, whereas actually the police got a lot wrong as well, didn't they?
The police got some things wrong. Their areas of judgment call, though, professional judgment call, rather than absolute black and white, you got it wrong, you didn't do this and you should have done it, or something like that. But the media, they've got the two outlets that are sort of in the firing line of Ofcom. But I think most of the problem actually came from social media. And we know that that's a Wild West. It was the first time I've ever seen anything like this, where people have been flocking to the scene and doing their own detective work and coming up with various theories, ranging from the fairly sensible through to the utterly crackpot. And so I think it's maybe the first example of what we're going to come to expect in the future, and the police need to learn from it. I don't think they're hiding behind the media. Both the police and the media have got questions to answer. I wouldn't say that they're mistakes that have been made. They're judgments calls that have been made. Some of the media stuff as well, certainly from the mainstream media outlet.
Well, I'll tell you what, Peter, can I ask you this? And, I like to think I'm a relatively straightforward guy, so I can take it on the chin if you give me an honest answer back, really. You know, do you think that people like me shouldn't have been hammering the police as much as when it got to, I think, day 20 odd, right? And you know, she was missing for 3 weeks. I think it was at the 3-week mark where I made a bit of a decision where I thought, actually, I really think the police have made mistakes here, and that was singularly based on the fact that we hadn't found Nicola. Do you think I was too harsh on the police?
I don't think it's valid to look at something and say this has been going on for X amount of days or weeks, and we haven't got a result yet, therefore the police have messed something up. You can have inquiries where there simply is no evidence to be found. You can have inquiries where the evidence that's there to be found is going to take some considerable time to find for a variety of reasons. And you can have inquiries where the evidence is jumping up, screaming at the first officers on the scene, and so it's solved really before anybody's done anything at all. And so there's a whole range of inquiries, and unless you're an investigator, you're not really in a position to estimate what's going on. And even I, as an investigator out here in the public sector, I've got no access to all the information the police have. I'm trying to second guess to a certain extent, read between the lines from what they're saying and what they're doing, and try and understand what that actually means is likely to be happening in their incident room.
All right, look, Peter, thank you very much. Great to get you back on. Peter Kirkham there, former Met officer. I'm just going to bring in very quickly back some of our viewers there who've been listening to that. It's Lee Harris in Bristol, Sue Cox in Felixstowe. Lee, look, based on what Peter said there, you know, do you think the media owe Nicola Bulley's family and potentially the police an apology?
Yeah, I'm not sure about the police just yet, but yeah, I'm all for freedom of the press, but they were absolutely right to hold them accountable, and there should be an inquiry into that. But, you know, I was glad to see Ofcom were extremely concerned. So yeah, hopefully I think they're right to call them out, and there's right to be an inquiry.
Lee, thank you. Sue, just a final quick one from you, if that's all right. In order to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again, how do they do that? What do they do? I mean, you can't really put press restrictions on reporting a missing persons case, can you? It's a tough one, Sue.
Well, I think I hope the media will learn from this, because the distress and anguish that they have actually caused the family, as I say, they should hang their heads in shame. They had no consideration for the family at all, even though they were masquerading under that premise that, you know, they were concerned about the family, they were concerned, but they weren't. I think that...
Yeah, I get what you're saying. You think it crossed the line, Sue, don't you, I think, from it being about reporting the facts and to it actually rather shamelessly being about, let's see how many views and clicks we can get. But, hey, maybe people will think I did the same thing. I hope you don't, but maybe they do. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Both of you, thank you very much. Top stuff, that. That is GB News viewer Lee Harris in Bristol and Sue Cox in Felixstowe. Right, we're going to whiz through this now because we've got loads more coming your way. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Now, she was hotly tipped to replace Nicola Sturgeon, but Kate Forbes killed off her chances, apparently, of becoming SNP leader by saying that she opposes gay marriage. Is this the case of someone with Christian values, and elements of Christian values, simply not being able to stand for high office in this, a Christian country, anymore? I'll see you in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "No, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the people's channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News,
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I joined GB News because I was sick and tired of not hearing my views being represented, not just mine, but so many people that I knew and spoke to.
I just couldn't get my voice out there. I couldn't say anything. I couldn't do anything. Whatever the narrative was, I kind of had to follow it.
GB News is there to provide a voice for those who have been ignored by the establishment media. We think different things, we've got a different style.
GB News is here to be optimistic and positive about the future.
It's real kind of dynamic and flowing, with the audience very much at the heart of it, like a big family.
Here at GB News, we talk about the things that matter to you.
Hearing the voices from right across our towns and cities, especially our towns.
All sides of the argument represented with a heavy dose of opinion.
We're on a mission here to make a difference.
And the GB News family really is here for you, and whatever time of day you can watch or listen.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, right, absolutely loads coming your way very, very shortly. I'm going to be asking the question is, can anyone actually run for high office in this country if they have, quotes-unquote, Christian values? Kate Forbes of the SNP, she's running to be their new leader. She's basically said she opposed gay marriage, and that now has caused a massive, massive backlash, which opens the way for Humza Yousaf. Now, what is interesting about all of this, which we're going to get stuck right into, is the idea that Humza Yousaf, relatively checkered past, of course, Transport Minister Humza Yousaf apologises for driving without insurance, for example. There is also, of course, this very well-documented recent incident. Humza Yousaf's family drops discrimination case against nursery. They thought that one of their daughters had potentially been denied a place because of her Muslim-sounding name. Well, that got kicked into the long grass, didn't it? There's also been some rather interesting comments that Humza Yousaf has made about race, but he is leading the way, nonetheless, in the SNP race, as things currently stand. But Kate Forbes pipes up and says, essentially, because of my Christian beliefs, I don't think this is right. Can you actually have hardcore Christian beliefs in this country and run for high office? I'm going to be talking about all of that. Also, moving on from that, I've got an absolute treat for you later, ladies and gentlemen. Will Meghan Markle actually sue South Park? You couldn't make this up. It's a little cartoon character that mugged them right off and exposed what many people believe to be universal truths as opposed to just her and Harry's truths. Well, supposedly, reports are coming out now saying they've been crying themselves to sleep over this cartoon character incident for the last few days, and that they're considering legal action. I am also going to try and find Prince Andrew a job because, bless him, he's fallen onto hard times, hasn't he? So I've tarted up Prince Andrew's CV, and I'm going to be getting stuck right into that, and we're going to be returning to the big one. We're on Cabinet Resignation Watch, ladies and gentlemen. Will Suella Braverman go? Will other Eurosceptics go? Steve Baker, potentially, and why? And if they do, is Rishi Sunak finished? Should Rishi ignore the right-wing Eurosceptics at his peril? You do not want to miss it. I've got the headlines first, though, with Tamsin.
Patrick, thank you. Here are the headlines at 3:33. The media regulator says it's extremely concerned by the actions of two broadcasters following comments made by Nicola Bulley's family. Both ITV and Sky contacted the 45-year-old's relatives after her body was discovered in the River Wire on Sunday, despite an appeal for privacy. Ofcom has written to both companies asking them to explain their actions. A former Conservative MP jailed for sexually assaulting a teenager has been freed from prison after serving half his term. Imran Ahmed Khan was jailed for 18 months last May for groping a 15-year-old boy after a party in 2008. The 49-year-old lost a Court of Appeal challenge against his conviction and sentence in December. The US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Russia's decision to suspend its participation in a nuclear treaty is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. Vladimir Putin made the announcement during a major speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power. Russia has summoned the US ambassador over what it describes as an aggressive course set by Washington. The Foreign and Northern Ireland secretaries will hold fresh talks with the EU this afternoon on the protocol. Earlier, the Prime Minister told Cabinet intensive negotiations are continuing in a bid to resolve the outstanding issues. Rishi Sunak says three main areas are being addressed: safeguarding Northern Ireland's place within the Union, protecting the Belfast Agreement and ensuring the free flow of trade. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
OK, people, it's hotting up north of the border. Now, just a day ago, Kate Forbes was the favourite to become the new leader of the SNP, but it only took Forbes just a few hours for her to make a comment that could frankly kill off, bizarrely, in my opinion, her hopes of replacing Nicola Sturgeon, which, even more bizarrely, opens up the race now for Humza Yousaf, who has got a checkered past to say the least. We'll talk about that shortly. The Scottish Finance Secretary, who's a devout Christian, it's Kate Forbes we're on about now, revealed that she'd have voted against gay marriage because of her religious beliefs. OK, so that's her religious beliefs, that's her moral compass, as it were. That's her decision, right? So that's what she said. Now, it's fair to say that Forbes' comments hasn't gone down well, with a number of senior SNP figures saying they would no longer support her. So because she has a particular denomination of Christianity's views, they are pulling out in a Christian country, but there we go. The Scottish Health Secretary, however, Humza Yousaf, is now the front-runner to win the leadership race. Rather a lot to go out here, and joining me, I have the perfect man to do it. It's data journalist at The Spectator. It's Michael Simmons. Michael, here we go again. So, Kate Forbes appears to be out of the running because she was essentially honest about her religious beliefs. Is that right?
Well, it does look like that has taken her from the bookies and the pollsters' favourite to now sort of third and last in the race. And it does seem to be specifically the comment she made that she would have voted against equal marriage that's kind of done for her. Everyone who's kind of followed Scottish politics knew that she had these devout religious views, but it's the first time that she's articulated that she would have actually voted against them. And I think that's it's interesting that she's done that politically, because Scotland is, overwhelmingly supportive of equal marriage, and certainly over the last 8 years of SNP rule, they've moved themselves from a socially conservative to a socially progressive party. So people thought that, Kate Forbes will have this view, but she'll dodge the question or keep it quiet for the sake of her leadership bid. So the fact that she's come out and said it is, kind of fascinating.
Well, it is fascinating, but I would argue that when you look at who this has potentially left it on a plate for until other people maybe come in, it's Humza Yousaf. And I've just got two headlines in front of me now, and I'm going to read them back to back. Transport Minister, this is going years back, Transport Minister Humza Yousaf apologises for driving without insurance. So there's that. And then we've got here a headline in The Guardian. Humza Yousaf's family drops discrimination case against nursery. And this was an incident where they feared as though their daughter was twice refused a place at a particular nursery because she had, quotes, a Muslim-sounding name, while other people had white-sounding names and they were offered places. It's interesting that they have now dropped that, and that has been called a baseless legal action by the nursery, which ironically named Little Scholars, actually, in question here. Just forgive me about this now. Someone with a maybe a disagreeable moral compass, i.e. Kate Forbes and her religious views about same-sex marriage, etc., but somebody who has, if the headlines is to be believed, driven without insurance while Transport Minister and made a, quote, baseless legal action relating to non-racism, that's OK, is it? So Humza Yousaf is front runner.
Well, certainly, you know, walking around Westminster today, Tories and Scottish Labour cannot believe their luck, because Kate Forbes was the person that they feared might, you know, lead Scotland to independence, might do a competent job of running the government. Humza Yousaf, as you pointed out, those are two examples. But, you know, any ministerial role he's had, he's made a real mess of. So people just cannot believe this. But I think from the SNP's point of view, a lot of their electoral strategy now is tied to this idea of progressive politics. So it would be a huge U-turn if they were going to say, we actually now accept Kate Forbes' views and actually we don't go along with this kind of progressive politics. So for them, they would rather have someone who many see as incompetent, Humza Yousaf, but at least speaks the party line on progressive issues.
And this is where we are, isn't it, now? So if the SNP are given a binary choice between someone who might be competent but have fundamentalist religious views, which I do appreciate, by the way, are maybe not in line with modern society, and, OK, I mean, there's a far cry from her maybe having those views and actually going out and, you know, forcibly stopping gay people from getting married or all of this stuff. It's her views, right? Humza Yousaf, you mentioned there that he's had several key roles and maybe hasn't always had the best run of it. Could you shine a bit more light on that for us, please?
Well, you know, as you mentioned, when he was Transport Secretary, he was stopped by police for driving without insurance. You know, I think that speaks for itself. He then was in the role where he had to introduce the controversial hate crime legislation that was potentially going to criminalise dinner table conversation. That's been so difficult for the police to work out how to implement that it's not yet enforced. And his most recent ministerial post has been as Health Secretary. And just before Christmas, we had the leaders of the Scottish NHS saying that it was on the brink of collapse. So, you know, he has just not done a good job as Health Secretary. And his, you know, I think his record speaks for itself. Just
worth drilling down a little bit onto this free speech stuff. And yeah, I am focusing more on Humza Yousaf, mainly because he's supposedly the #1 candidate at the minute. So why not? As it currently stands, if there was a vote on it today, supposedly Humza Yousaf is leading north of the border. So we might as well focus a bit on it. This free speech element of it. So if you and I are chatting around a dinner table in Humza Yousaf's Scotland, what happens? We can get, reported to the police for saying something a bit fruity?
So this specific part of the bill, the opposition, I think, managed to sort of temper and block. But basically, the idea was that if you said something that could be seen as inciting hatred or causing hatred to people, that was going to be a crime, even if it was in your own home. Now, as I say, that bit didn't make it into the bill, but that was as sort of originally intended by the Scottish Government.
Up north, then, is that essentially... Well, it's Humza Yousaf's to lose. Unless somebody else comes in, are we expecting any late entries?
I don't think so. Nominations are open until Friday, so in theory, someone could say, you know, everyone here is rubbish, Kate's blown up her chances, I'll stick my hat in the ring. But it does look like it's become Humza's to lose, and beyond Friday, he'll be leading the race.
And potentially, like you said, potentially an absolute gift for Scottish Tories and Scottish Labour, because there is rather a lot to go out. And I'm just going to emphasise again a particular headline here. SNP politician and his wife claimed their daughter was denied a place because of her Muslim-sounding name. They kicked off big time about that. They then withdrew that particular complaint, which I just find absolutely bizarre. But, Michael, thank you very, very much. That is data journalist at The Spectator, Michael Simmons there. Right, look, it's a busy day here at GB News, as you can probably tell. So should Prince Harry have to pay for his own armed protection in the UK? You'd be surprised at how many people think he shouldn't. You might also be surprised at how much this legal fight is already costing you. Talking of legal fights, Meghan Markle, reportedly, is considering suing South Park. Yes, that's right. You just couldn't make this up. I'll be back in just a couple of minutes and I will tell you exactly how many people out there think Prince Harry should have to put his hand in his pocket and pay for his own police protection. See you in a tick.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
OK, 2 more big ones to take us through to the top of the hour. We're going to be discussing whether or not Harry should pay for his own police protection and how many of you, shockingly, actually think that he shouldn't. But after all the doom and gloom, here's a little bit of good economic news. That's right, because survey evidence released this morning suggests that the UK economy has just shown a surprise return to growth and now looks set to avoid a widely predicted recession. Who could have predicted that? Oh, talking to which, our economics and business editor, Liam Halligan, is here with On the Money. Take it away, Liam.
Broadcasters are very quick to cover the doom and gloom, Patrick, so let's cover something quite interesting. Now, these aren't GDP numbers, these aren't official growth numbers, but there's a very, very well-regarded, highly authoritative series of numbers called the Purchasing Managers Index, which are surveys of commercial leaders, business owners, and they're like they preempt GDP numbers. And the Purchasing Manager Index number for January and February suggests that we could actually avoid recession. Let's have a quick look at some of the numbers here. So back in December 2022, the Purchasing Manager Index was down at 49. In January, it was at 48.5, which is even lower. And in February, despite a lot of people saying it would be 47, it was actually 53. And bear in mind, Patrick, with these PMI numbers, if the reading is 50 or more than 50, that is what indicates economic growth. OK? So what this is suggesting is that in February, according to surveys of business leaders, they fill in these surveys and they suggest what they think is happening, whether they're going to invest, whether they're going to grow, whether their orders have gone up, whether they're running pubs, restaurants, factories, or whatever they're doing. And it's if the PMI says that GDP figures are going to get better, they nearly always get better. So for months and months, We've had people saying, of course we're going to go into recession, the UK, slowest growing economy, etc., etc. It looks like we've dodged this bullet. It looks like we aren't going to go into recession now, at least on the strength of these PMI numbers, which is good news. This will give people in boardrooms across the country, whether their boardroom is in a big, tall office building or their kitchen table, it will give them strength of mind to invest and to carry on growing.
You know, it's great this, because I think if you listen to a lot of broadcasters and media outlets, if you stuck your head out the window, you would expect to see Britain in the middle of some kind of nuclear Armageddon and everything's absolutely rubbish and it's all going to hell in a handcar. And the reality is, clearly, not that. But what will this mean going forward for Jeremy Hunt?
Well, we've got the budget coming up on March the 15th. I say it to you pretty much every day when we have these chats in the studio each afternoon. And there's so much going on behind the scenes. We've got that big Tory tax row that I've been talking about over the last couple of days. A lot of Conservative backbenchers, they don't want corporation tax going up from 19 to 25%, which is currently the law. It's going to go up in April. You've now got some national newspapers behind that campaign as well, including my own paper, The Telegraph, and the Daily Mail. That's a mighty, formidable combination. You've got George Osborne, the former Chancellor, no friend of Rishi Sunak, quite frankly, a Remainer and a Brexiteer, saying that corporation tax shouldn't go up either. But what we've also had today, apart from these, frankly, really quite interesting and encouraging PMI numbers, we've had numbers, Patrick, and again, I think woefully underreported from the Treasury, from the Office for National Statistics, showing that in January, the UK government was actually in surplus, quite a healthy surplus. So they got a lot more revenue in than they took in, than they actually spent. And the surplus was about £5.4 billion. The Treasury was thinking that there would be no surplus in January. And if you go from April last year to January, so that's most of the tax year, April to April, the OBR, the Office of Budget Responsibility, has now underestimated the power, the health of the UK's public finances by about £30 billion. Pounds. The estimates back in November are £30 billion off. So that is an awful lot of fiscal headroom. So you're going to get trade unionists looking at these numbers saying, so you can afford to pay us more money to try and break these strikes. And you'll also get Tory backbenchers saying, so you can afford to cut taxes. This is good news from the Treasury, but it's the kind of good news that Jeremy Hunt is not going to want to hear.
There you go, Liam. Thank you. As always, absolute gold, mate. Cheers. Liam Halligan there, our economics and business editor. Right, OK, so some good news, but check this out. Now, a recent YouGov poll has suggested that the majority of Brits think Prince Harry should receive police protection. But, here's the catch, Harry. Only if he pays for it himself. So the poll also showed that more than a quarter of people thought the second son of the king, the spare, or Ware, as his book is called, shouldn't get any police protection at all. It comes as the Duke of Sussex launched a legal battle with the Home Office over the decision to reduce his protection whilst in the UK. And couple of this as well, supposedly that has cost us, you, me, the taxpayer, around £300,000 already. Just this legal wrangling. So Harry clearly not doing too much to care for the British taxpayer there, but the decision was made back in February 2020, shortly after the Duke announced that he was stepping back from royal duties. On the legal case, like I've said, has already cost us a whopping 300 grand. Joining me right now is royal broadcaster Helena Chard. Helena, thank you very much. Great stuff. Well, apparently Princess Anne doesn't even get full-time protection, and she was nearly kidnapped back in 1974, and her former bodyguard was actually shot. So what makes Harry think he's so special?
Hey, Patrick, hi. You know, I think it's incredible. I actually think it's the amount of people as well that feel that he should get police protection is quite high, surprisingly. You know, the Home Office axed Prince Andrew's Scotland Yard protection way back, and quite obviously, and I find it bizarre that Prince Harry feels that he should have 24/7 protection when in the UK. For him and his family. I do get it. I mean, after launching, you know, his book and talking about how many Taliban soldiers he killed, and I mean...
But he's done this, Helena, though, hasn't he? And this is the thing.
People are going to be, you know, after him, maybe.
Yeah, he's done this to himself in a sense, though, and I obviously don't wish any ill will on Harry whatsoever. I certainly don't wish him any harm. But the reality is, if you're going to put a kill count on the amount of actual terrorists that you've killed, you probably shouldn't be surprised if the terror threat to you and your family, even your kids, rises. And if you are going to essentially mug Britain off on the way out, and a lot of Brits, the majority of Brits, I think again you're going to get a bit of pushback, aren't you? Oh, it's all right, don't worry. We've lost Helena there, unfortunately, but we can have this chat amongst ourselves, ladies and gentlemen, actually, because this is a big one. So I'm going to read you some of the facts and figures on this. So Prince Harry should have police protection. This is what most Brits think, according to a YouGov poll, but that he should pay for it himself. So more than half of the public think that the second son of the king, he should have police protection, but 37% of people think that he should pay for it himself. Now, I frankly think that it's reasonable that he pays for it himself. Does he not want to have his cake and eat it here at this point? He wants to have freedom from the royal family and yet continue to bang on about them. He wants freedom from Britain, but then at the same time he wants to be quite mean about us all throughout the course of everything that he's saying. He wants to cry racism, or his wife cry racism, but then not name the quotes-unquote royal racist. And now, to top it all off, he's going, well, if you don't give me armed police protection, then I'm not coming. All right, Harry, well, you know where the airport is. Don't go to it if you don't particularly want to come. That would be my view, but of course I want to know yours. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Lots of you suggesting that Harry, if he wants police protection, should get Netflix to pay for it, could maybe dip into his trust fund to pay for it, maybe he could get Meghan Markle to pay for it. She's worth a few quid as well. And talking of Meghan Markle, did you know, and we're going to be covering this in the next hour, that Meghan Markle is reportedly considering legal action against South Park, the creators of South Park. All of that remains unconfirmed. But it's an interesting discussion nevertheless, because actually if they can't even take a little joke about themselves, which resonated with a lot of people, mainly because the joke was quite true, I think, then actually what's the point of them? Keep your emails coming in, and lots of you have been getting in touch with what's been our main topic of the day, which is Rishi Sunak being warned by members of his cabinet that they might resign over his handling of the Northern Ireland Protocol deal. Now, I know that the words Northern Ireland and Protocol could bring a tear to a glass eye. They are just, if you want to go into a coma, just delve into the nitty-gritty of the Northern Ireland Protocol, and I will not be doing that today, ladies and gents. But what I will be doing is talking about the potential cabinet resignations. We are possibly on cabinet resignation watch. There are rumours that Suella Braverman, the Home Secretary, she's resigned before, she knows where the pen and paper is, she might potentially go if she feels as though Brexit is being betrayed by virtue of Northern Ireland maybe being siphoned off to the European Union. Do you think that Sunak is toast if he ignores the right wing of the party? Barry says it's nothing to do with Sunak ignoring the right wing of the Conservative Party. It's to do with Sunak ignoring the Brexit referendum result. But I believe ignoring the referendum result has happened already. Yeah, Jeff says, time for one more, I think. If Sunak cannot get the DUP to agree, along with members of his own cabinet, and still goes ahead, democracy will be dead in the water. He's in a very tricky position here, Rishi Sunak, because if he has got the ERG, European Research Group there, you would argue, I suppose, proper Brexiteers, right wing of the Tory party. Many people think that's the Tory base. That's maybe the fabric and the DNA of the traditional Conservative party. If he can't keep them on side, and he can't get them on side, and he can't get the DUP on side, what he's going to have to try to do is rely on Labour and Keir Starmer to prop him up and get these votes through. And I suspect a couple of things will happen here. Resignations, potentially, from cabinet ministers. Also, I think it will open the floodgates of dissent in the Conservative Party, which have they've been bursting at the seams, haven't they? Now, he's just about staved it off for a while. But you know what else I think will happen? I think you will see a lot of people, especially in the Red Wall, decide to vote for another party. I don't think that party will be Labour. I don't think that party, of course, will be the Conservative Party. I certainly don't think it will be the Lib Dems, although I could be wrong. I wonder whether or not this is fertile ground now for another party to do quite well. We're going to be returning to this throughout the course of the show because, potentially anyway, resignations may well drop. And this is time for one more from Jackie. He says the Tories are already on course to lose the next election. Why is Rishi trying to sail the Brexiteers down the river on his way out? And this is it again. Does the Conservative Party under Rishi Sunak actually stand for anything Conservative? Does it actually stand for anything like, quotes unquote, right-wing politics? Where is he at, really, when it comes to mass immigration? Where is he at when it comes to illegal immigration? That's all still rumbling on. And now, will he put the cherry on top of that potential resignation cake by saying, actually, you know what I'm going to do? I'm basically going to hand over Northern Ireland to the European Union. I think that would be an absolute disaster, but we're expecting more developments on that throughout the course of the show. I will bring them to you. And a little bit later on, something a bit light-hearted, ladies and gents, so it's not all doom and gloom. That's right. I will try to find, live on air, I will try to find Prince Andrew a new job, because supposedly he's at risk of being turfed out of his gaff, and we can't have that, can we? GBviews at gbnews.uk. I want to know from you, do you think Rishi Sunak is absolutely dead in the water and finished if he alienates the right wing of his party? I, Patrick Christys, will see you in just a couple of minutes. Stay tuned.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere. Amazing! You see, amazing! You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel. Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful. Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Right then, it's 4 o'clock. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. And I tell you what, the inbox is absolutely flying. Why? Well, because Rishi Sunak's cabinet is on the ropes. Yes, people, we are on resignation watch. Reports this afternoon that Home Secretary Suella Braverman is at least thinking about quitting, and the Prime Minister could be about to lose the right wing of his party. It's all going Pete Tonga already for Rishi, isn't it? Well, why? Because there are rumours that he wants to sign off on a deal that would essentially hand Northern Ireland over to the EU. As we understand it, heavy-hitting Tory Brexiteers, well, they're not happy. It's a massive day for Rishi. We'll bring you the updates on that as we get it. Now, this is another important one, actually, and I definitely want your involvement on this, because I think for obvious reasons, maybe I'm not best placed to give my view on this. Are the press in the wrong when it comes to their reporting of Nicola Bulley? Media watchdog Ofcom has said it is extremely concerned by comments from the family, and it has written to ITV and Sky to explain to them their actions. And this is, of course, in the wake of them allegedly, anyway, contacting the family after a body had been found. Is this the return of the gutter press, or have the media been responding to massive public interest? Get your views in on that. I want to hear from you. And get this as well. We're going to cross live to Warsaw to hear from the US President Joe Biden whenever he decides to shuffle in within the next half hour as he visits Poland to mark the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. You can see crowds gathering already. They're live images from Warsaw. We'll bring you that because it opens up a massive door for us, people. A lot of people out there right now are saying not a penny more for Ukraine. Not a penny more. That's enough. We're skin. Is it time that we stop sending our support in the fight against Putin? I'm going to be asking that. And will Meghan Markle sue South Park for taking the mickey out of her and the artist formerly known as Prince Harry? Oh, yeah, and I'll try and find Air Miles Andy a job as well, Prince Andrew. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Did the press go too far with the Nicola Bulley case? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Now, though, it is your latest headlines with the wonderful Polly Middlehurst.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. Well, the top story on GB News today is that the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken says Russia's decision to suspend its participation in a nuclear treaty is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. Vladimir Putin made the announcement during a major speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power. Russia has now summoned the US ambassador over what it describes as an aggressive course set by Washington.
Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation. Before resuming the discussion of this treaty, we must first understand what do such countries of NATO, like France and Great Britain, aspire to do, and how will we take their strategic arsenals into account?
Well, that comes as US President Joe Biden holds talks in Warsaw with the President of Poland, a day after his surprise visit to Ukraine. The two leaders address security issues and growing NATO's presence within Poland. President Biden is due to hold a news conference on those growing tensions with Russia later this hour, as Patrick was saying. Now, here, the media regulator says it's extremely concerned by the actions of two particular broadcasters following comments made by Nicola Bulley's family. Both ITV and Sky News contacted the 45-year-old's relatives after her body was discovered in the River Wire on Sunday, despite an appeal from the family for privacy. Ofcom has written to both companies asking them to explain themselves, and the police are also being criticised over the way they've handled the case. Former Met detective Peter Bleksley told GB News that he feels the investigation hasn't quite been up to scratch.
They're going to have to take a very long, hard look at how they've conducted all of this, not only the investigation, but very much the communication. And I hope that the wider British police take some lessons from all of this, because, quite frankly, if you get the messaging wrong and people don't believe you, they're not going to trust your investigations. And that, I think, is part of the reason why so many people turned up at St Michael's on Wire.
Peter Bleksley. Now, a former Conservative MP jailed for sexually assaulting a teenager has been freed from prison after serving half his prison sentence. Imran Ahmed Khan was jailed for 18 months last May for groping a 15-year-old boy after a party in 2008. The 49-year-old lost a Court of Appeal challenge against his conviction in December. Supermarkets are expanding the lists of fruits and vegetables that they are going to be limiting for sale. Asda is one of the supermarkets that's now rationing customers to a maximum of 3 items from a list of 8, which includes tomatoes, broccoli and raspberries. Morrisons will also be introducing similar restrictions from Wednesday. Bad weather across Europe and Africa is being blamed for the disruption in supply chains, with retailers warning it could last for weeks. The Foreign and Northern Ireland secretaries are holding fresh talks with the EU on the Northern Ireland Protocol today. And earlier, the Prime Minister told Cabinet Ministers at Number 10 that intensive negotiations were continuing in a bid to resolve the outstanding issues. Rishi Sunak says the 3 main areas being addressed are safeguarding Northern Ireland's place within the Union, protecting the Belfast Agreement and ensuring the free flow of trade. The Turkey-Syria border has been hit by another earthquake and dozens of aftershocks. That coming just 2 weeks after huge tremors rocked the region, killing more than 47,000 people. The latest 6.4 magnitude quake has claimed at least 6 lives and injured almost 300. Founder of the Global Relief Trust, Shadow Rahman, says people are still shaken by the previous tremor.
Tonight, in several cities, not only in Hatay, but also in neighboring cities such as Adana and Gaziantep, people rush to the oil stations to get petrol and gas to their cars, and they slept in their cars, or some of them even try to drive to outskirts of the cities or to other regions, safer regions, and aftershocks are still ongoing, unfortunately, in the region, and the trauma is still going on.
Here, the UK's Chief Medical Officer has criticised the marketing of vapes. So Chris Whitty described them as appalling, saying it's clear that some products are designed to appeal to children. Research published last July found the number of young people vaping is increasing, with many being influenced by ads on social media. And lastly, the head coach of Wales's national rugby team has described possible strike action by his players as a genuine threat. The dispute between players and the Professional Rugby Board is over a new contract, with players saying they don't have long-term certainty. And with 4 days to go before Wales's clash against England in the Six Nations, they are concerned a solution hasn't yet been reached. Talks are due to be held tomorrow, and Warren Gatland said he's confident the game will go ahead. We'll keep you posted on that. I'm back in half an hour. Now back to Patrick.
All right, people, keep getting in touch. Have the press gone too far when it comes to Nicola Bulley? That's one of the big hooks for us today. GBviews at gbnews.uk. We're going to be talking about that throughout. If you think they went too far, why, who, and what did they do wrong? Was there massive public interest? Was it actually an invasion of privacy? Return to the gutter press. Get your views coming in on that. And the reason we're talking about it, of course, is because the family have massively hit back, massively pushed back, and named and shamed both Sky and ITV. So we'll be taking a little dive into that. But in other news, get a load of this, because we are supposedly, anyway, on cabinet resignation watch. There's some serious, strong rumours, anyway, that Rishi Sunak might be facing a massive backlash from several pro-Brexit, right-wing elements of his Tory party. Well, why is that? Well, it's in relation, of course, to this Northern Ireland deal. Some people would say that it would basically hand Northern Ireland back to the European Union, and that would be a massive invasion of our national sovereignty. There are reports that the Prime Minister could now be facing that cabinet revolt, and the government's currently trying to get a deal with EU leaders to see a return to power-sharing government instalment. But the passage of the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which, if passed, would allow the UK to unilaterally abandon parts of the EU withdrawal agreement, has been paused in Parliament. Essentially, the prospect of ditching the bill has been met with dismay from Eurosceptic Tories. And today, Jacob Rees-Mogg accused the Prime Minister of imitating Theresa May's failed Brexit strategy. I am not massively bothered by the intricacies and the very fabric and the fibres and the DNA and the nitty-gritty of the Northern Ireland Protocol. I've said it before, I'll say it again. It's really dull, OK? But what I am bothered about is whether or not we're about to lose another Tory Prime Minister, whether or not that Tory Prime Minister is about to side, potentially, with the Labour Party, as opposed to maybe the right-wing Eurosceptic elements of his own party. And what would that mean for your vote? With me to pick through this hot mess is our political reporter, Olivia Utley. Olivia, thank you very much. So who's angry in Cabinet?
Well, the main name that keeps coming up is Steve Baker, who isn't a Secretary of State level position, but he is a Minister of State and he holds a lot of sway with the party. He was the chairman of the ERG, that very influential group of Conservative backbenchers, sort of hardline Brexiteers, as it were. And it is looking as though he could resign if Rishi Sunak goes ahead and pushes through this deal. Now, there's a question mark over whether Rishi Sunak would go ahead if the DUP isn't on side. And earlier today, I was saying that I thought that he probably wouldn't push ahead. Now it's looking more likely that he might. He's getting so fed up with what's happening in his own party. He wants to get this deal over the line. He is very worried about the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which Robert Buckland, a former Justice Secretary, is saying might not even be legal, might not be legally binding. He's very worried about that. He wants to avoid that whole situation, circumvent it by pushing through his own Brexit deal. And he knows that it would pass in Parliament because it has the support of Labour. So it looks possible that he could ride roughshod over the wishes of the DUP and the ERG and just go ahead with this deal. But he runs the risk then, not only of a backbench Conservative revolt, which is looking bigger than Number 10 originally feared, but also of losing Steve Baker, his Northern Ireland minister, not a good look losing your Northern Ireland minister in the middle of this. And Steve Baker is known as a serious Brexiteer. He has the backing of a lot of Conservative Brexit supporting MPs. People were considering backing him to run for Prime Minister. So although he might not be a Secretary of State, we shouldn't underestimate his influence.
No, but also, fundamentally, should a British Prime Minister who supposedly supported Brexit himself, who is in charge of a Brexit voting country, be backing any kind of deal that would give a foreign court jurisdiction over a piece of our sovereign territory and allow customs checks for products that are made in Northern Ireland for entering his own territory now, Great Britain? Well, why would he do this? It's all very well and good. He might have seen off Sturgeon in Scotland, and we're not going to lose Scotland anytime soon, and then just signs a piece of paper and he's lost Northern Ireland.
Well, the Brexiteers, there are Brexiteers in the party and outside of the party, actually. Nigel Farage sees the merits of this deal, interestingly. But there are Brexiteers within the party who say that this isn't akin to signing Northern Ireland over to Brussels. The Northern Ireland Protocol Bill is quite a messy piece of legislation which might not really work and would ruin our relationship with Brussels, whereas this is a sort of fudge which actually, in some respects, even the DUP think it's got its merits because it would stop the customs checks on British goods going over to Northern Ireland, which is really the main problem. So there is an argument that this is a good position to have reached, and that Brexit supporters can support it with a clear conscience. But there are plenty of people who feel, as you say, as though it is essentially signing away some of our sovereignty to the EU.
Well, this is it. He's facing a potentially massive ruction within his own party here, and that ruction, I suspect, thank you, by the way, Olivia Utley, our political reporter, will be essentially about whether or not he decides to ignore the ERG, the right-wing Eurosceptic elements of his Conservative Party, the likes of which some would argue embody the fabric or the tradition of the Conservative Party, more of its core values. If he ignores that and he ends up being propped up by Labour's Keir Starmer, I think that's a bad look. But I've got a sneaky suspicion that if he does that, what this means is that people will be able to say that Rishi Sunak does not support right-wing traditional Conservative elements of his party, does not support Eurosceptic elements of his party, and then people will dig down and go, hang on a minute, what actual proper Conservative policies is Rishi Sunak presiding over? What does the new version of the Tory party actually stand for? Where is he on mass migration? Where is he on illegal immigration, for that matter? Where is he on tax? Where is he on this big net zero agenda? And all of a sudden, I think it opens the market up for other parties. And joining me now, by the way, in 45 minutes, I'm going to be hearing live from Nigel Farage, the man himself, who Olivia mentioned there. So that will be interesting. Nigel Farage will join me live on this show shortly. But before that, I've got the Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. Rebecca, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Do you feel as though if Rishi ignores the right-wing elements of his party, the Eurosceptic elements of his party, he is dead in the water?
I hope so. Because there's one thing about Rishi, in my opinion, he is the modern day Judas. He's trying to sell out Northern Ireland for his 30 pieces of silver, and all the way through this, and even Suella Braverman has said this, that Northern Ireland is being used as a bargaining tool, and it's our biggest bargaining tool, actually. There is the problem. You know, they're not actually considering the people and the wishes of Northern Ireland, of the UK, and of everybody that voted for Brexit. There's one thing, and I just don't understand why they don't get this. We voted to leave the EU in its entirety. They left part of Ireland behind with them, and now we are in a very sticky situation. So I most certainly hope that he does face revolt, because right now what he's trying to do is going through the back door, back to the EU, come begging and pleading, listen to what your people wanted, leave in the entirety, and stop trying to do your backdoor deals.
Well, does it potentially indicate, Rebecca, as I've got an email here from David, actually, who said, you know what, I'm paraphrasing here, David, he says, you know what, actually, this is more about just the ideological elements to this. This really is about the future of our United Kingdom. And, of course, he's right about that. Would any Prime Minister who really believes in the United Kingdom and who really believes in national sovereignty even be entertaining any kind of deal like this that would possibly leave Northern Ireland under the jurisdiction of foreign judges and massive customs checks?
Absolutely not. Like, do we not get a say as a nation anymore? Does our word not mean anything? We voted to leave. Northern Ireland are part of the United Kingdom. Why on earth are they being forgotten? They're good people, and just because they have got a bit of sea in between us, it doesn't mean that their views and their thoughts don't even matter. They're being forgotten in all of this, and how on earth can we allow that to happen? So I most certainly hope that any MP or anybody that is involved in politics who does not support Rishi, resign. For goodness sakes, don't let this happen.
So, the rumours are that supposedly Suella Braverman very, very concerned about all of this. Steve Baker very, very concerned about all of this as well. In your views, should Suella Braverman resign immediately if she's not happy with what Rishi brings to the table?
Yes. There's other reasons why I think that she should resign as well. However, obviously, you know, we do have some people within the current government who do speak up on our behalf, but not wholeheartedly. The problem is that we have the Conservatives leading the way on this, and it's a party that never wanted this to happen in the first place. They did it as a token gesture. They thought we would want to stay in the EU, and when they didn't, well, when we didn't, they went, oh goodness, now what do we do? So, you know, we've got a huge problem on our hands. I would love some people who represent our views to stay, but we have to make a stand, and we have to leave, and we have to make it known that we're not happy.
But if Rishi Sunak decides to go down a route that pleases Remainers and the Labour Party more than it pleases the DUP and the Eurosceptic wing of the Conservative Party, surely that indicates that, frankly, he doesn't really care about Eurosceptics or people who are in the DUP. And what would that mean for you? Would you be looking at this and thinking, well, presumably there's fertile ground here for people like your party to go and sweep up people who don't feel as though the Conservative Party is actually Conservative anymore?
Yeah, and we're already doing that, you know, and I am obviously pleased with that. But, you know, at the bottom of the UKIP heart, and certainly at my heart, is that we care about people and we care about them being protected and getting a job done. Yes, of course, I want as many people coming over to us as absolutely possible. But more than that, we want people to be, you know, to be part of politics, to be listened to. That's the important thing for me. So I'm not going to sit here and gloat and go, woohoo, more votes for us and all the rest of it, because that's not what I stand for as a human.
Well, no, I think it's very much a case of watch this space, right? Because Rishi Sunak's keeping his cards close to his chest. But seriously, I think there will be resignations over this. The noises that we're hearing about behind the scenes is that there will be resignations if he ploughs ahead. And what does that mean, frankly, for the future of the Conservative Party? I will be talking very, very soon anyway as well to Nigel Farage, who's got his views about whether or not this is alienating a right-winger, Eurosceptic element of the Tory party. Rebecca, thank you very much for coming on the show. Rebecca Jane, who's the Deputy Leader of UKIP. Now, I'm going to gear change a bit here, people, because I want a lot of your interaction. Well, I always do, really, but especially on this one, because this is the Nicola Bulley case that gripped the nation. It was rumbling on for more than 3 weeks and came to a tragic end yesterday. In fact, live on this show, of course, we revealed, the police revealed that the body had been identified as that of Nicola Bulley. But with it came another statement, a family statement. And it's that's opened up a discussion that I want to have with you all at home, or if you're listening in your cars or online or whatever you're doing. And in the last few moments, ITV have confirmed that they will cooperate fully with media watchdog Ofcom's request to explain its actions over the Nicola Bulley case. That's following comments made by her family. So they say they were devastated by the loss of their partner, mother and friend. This is the family statement. But also, they put the media very much under scrutiny for the treatment of the case, and it's hoped that lessons will be learned all round. In case you missed it, basically, the family massively stuck it to Sky News and ITV and said that allegedly, they tried to contact the family after a body had been found, despite the family asking for privacy. I know that media attention to this has been a source of big public controversy. Plenty of people send me emails on a daily basis saying that we shouldn't have been talking about Nicola Bulley case as much as it was. Plenty of people clearly were absolutely gripped by this case and were desperate for news about it. So there is that side of it, isn't there? Joining me now is former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. It's Simon Harding. Simon, thank you very much. Initially, what do you make of just the topic that we're leading in with before we talk about the police, really, which is that the family have absolutely slammed certain elements of the press, Sky News and ITV, saying that they've behaved despicably. I mean, in your view, is that kind of behaviour just the gutter press?
Well, I think, I've been a senior investigating officer on quite a number of murders, and I think I've never experienced where the press have come in at that particular point, when there's been confirmation to a family that the person found in whatever circumstance, that they've come in there. The press know of the protocols around policing in terms of family liaison officers and the restrictions you put around a family and the support you give them. And they know, to play the game with the police in terms of, we do talk to each other and we use each other for the benefit of trying to find people who are wanted or reassure the public or whatever it is. So I think, if that has happened, and you say allegedly, if that has happened, that's a really poor show from people.
Do you think this is quite useful for the police, though? And I'm certainly not unnecessarily standing up at all for the way that certain elements of the media have behaved in this. So that's absolutely not what I'm doing. But is it quite useful for the police now that the narrative has shifted onto certain elements of the media and maybe away from what many people thought might have been quite a bungled investigation of the Nicola Bulley case?
Yeah, I'm sure any deflection is good at this moment in time, but it's still very raw. Don't forget, this was only yesterday they found out that it was Nicola, and I think if I was to look forward, I think, and that's what people will start to do. There's certain cases that in this country that change the way that things happen, and this could be one of those cases. And if Nicola was to have a legacy, would be to stop this happening to other families, and and change the way that the social media has behaved as well, to have a positive outcome and positive legacy, which is going to be obviously in the future when there's been a debrief and a dissection of everything that's happened from the police and the press and everybody else. But, this will open up discussions about all sorts of things, and also including, part of this as well that you look at is that Nicola, if we are to understand that she was suffering from a form of mental health or depression brought on by the menopause and alcohol, that she was perfectly, what people would consider perfectly normal for the minutes up until she then, obviously, if that's the case, went into the river at that point. And that's another discussion, isn't it? When you see how people can just change, you suffer from mental illness, and no matter what sort of level it is.
It is, yeah. Look, Sammy, you mentioned about what happens going forward. I know you were talking about the media there and if any changes are going to be made to the way it's reported and things. I find it difficult to see how that in practical terms could change, really, without putting massive press freedoms on. I think there would be pushback and the potential for that to creep into other areas. I don't know. But just in terms of what happens next in this case, what will there be? There'll be an inquest, will there? Do you mind talking us through how these things normally work?
Yeah, just to touch on that one point, I don't think many SIOs would want to have a complete shutdown of that relationship with the press because, as I said, we need each other in these particular things, especially, when you're trying to find people who are wanted, who are dangerous. That's important. But the next stage is really, I don't think we've heard about the result of a post-mortem yet to explain exact cause of death. There's a bit of horrible speculation last night about the potential that Nicola was put in there as a deposition afterwards. No evidence of that whatsoever, but these are the things that just need to be sorted out. So you'll have the results of the post-mortem. It might take up to 8 weeks for things like toxicology, where you understand what's in her bloodstream. That could take quite a while to come back. And then you move towards, at the moment, what is expected to be a coroner's inquest. And that's when the coroner gets all the information and an inquest will take place to explain what the police know and how Nicola unfortunately died.
All right, well, look, thank you very, very much. And that is Simon Harding there, who is a former senior investigating officer at the Met Police. And, yeah, I've been asking you, ladies and gentlemen, what you feel about this, but we'll go to those. Now, it's a very busy day here at GB News. We will hear live from US President Joe Biden very, very shortly, and it opens up a discussion we're going to be having off the back of it, straight off the back of it. A single penny more to Ukraine? Yes or no? I'll see you in 2.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online. Across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back to GB News. Now, in a few minutes' time, I'm going to be crossing live to Warsaw, and we're going to hear from the US President Joe Biden. Now, he's visiting Poland to mark the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but I really think this throws open a huge amount of questions. Americans, by the way, are, not all of them, obviously, but an increasing number of them, are very, very angry at the amount of money that is still being sent to Ukraine in light of the fact that Joe Biden has quite a few issues at home to deal with, infrastructure issues there, and people feel as though he's neglecting them. I think it opens up again another debate here. You are watching on your screen, by the way, the Polish leader Duda there, and those are live images from Warsaw. But it opens up a huge, huge, huge discussion topic here when it comes to what's happening right here at home. And calls today from Liz Truss, who's trying to resurrect herself, and Boris Johnson as well, saying we should send fighter jets to Ukraine. I know we had this chat last week, but it's really opened up the discussion about whether or not we should send a single penny more, actually. When you look at we've got this massive tax surplus at the moment, so supposedly Britain is quids in at the minute. We're not going to go into a recession. Hey, great stuff. And we're sitting on a load of excess money, 30 billion quid more than we were anticipated to have at this point as a nation. Well, I can't help but wonder, I don't know about you, how much of that money is going to find its way over to Ukraine? Of course, loads of people think that it should. And frankly, as well, there are a lot of people out there, and the polls would suggest that a lot of people out there, a majority of people, do support us continuing to pump money into Ukraine, continuing to help with their defence efforts against Russia. But I just wonder how long can this go on for when national leaders, so you've got Rishi Sunak and you've got likes of Joe Biden, go abroad and start helping to prop up other nations at vast tens of billions of dollars expense to their respective taxpayers. At what point does the sympathy run out when they say that they haven't got money for things over here and they haven't got money to help people through a cost of living crisis? Those are live images from Warsaw. Look, what I'm going to do is I'm going to dip back into that when Joe Biden emerges, but I've got loads coming your way, so we'll go to Biden as and when he manages to make it on stage. But before that, a recent YouGov poll has suggested that the majority of Brits think Prince Harry should receive police protection, but only if he pays for it himself. And the poll also showed that more than a quarter of people thought that he shouldn't get any police protection. Joining me now is historian and licensed lay minister for the Church of England, is Martin Whittock. There he is. Thank you very much, Martin. Right, OK, do you think that Prince Harry deserves taxpayer-funded police protection?
Right, OK. I think a key word is they deserve, because with quite a few people, my sympathy for Harry has run pretty thin recently, OK? Nevertheless, I would be one of the majority of people. I remember, of course, if it's 37% think he should pay, that means there's a majority of people that think he shouldn't. So I would put myself on reflection as one of those people that thinks that while he is in this country, that in fact he should get taxpayer funded protection, simply because he is a key member of the royal family, even though he has retired from that at the moment. And God forbid anything happen to the Prince of Wales and his family, then in fact that's the point at which Harry would realise that being a spare puts you a lot closer to the crown than I am, for example. And so I think when he's here for the coronation, for example, I think we do need to protect him because he has a constitutional significance, even though I think he has let a lot of people down. So don't get me wrong, I got a lot of problems with Harry, but I think when he's here, we do owe him that constitutional protection. That's my feeling.
But hang on a minute, we're all skin, aren't we? And it looks as though we're probably about to lob a load more money over to Ukraine. Can't Harry, with his bumper Netflix deal and his rich wife, pay for it himself? That's before we've started talking about Mummy's trust fund, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I'm not unsympathetic towards that, but I just think that while he's here, there is that constitutional role. We do pay for a relatively small number of royals now, as you may know, the monarch and spouse, Prince and Princess of Wales, their children get close protection. Princess Anne doesn't. Prince Edward and Sophie Wessex, they only get partial when they're on key business. But I think that because of his particular role, my current feeling, and I'm willing to be persuaded on this, but my current feeling is that because of his constitutional role and his closest to the throne, we do need to protect him and his family. But like I say, I'm not happy with the way in which he has behaved, but I just think that because of his particular role, spare is still very close to the crown, and we still need to protect that constitutional position, in my opinion. Although I do take your point, I understand where you're from.
I'm going to ask this, right, because obviously absolutely nobody in their right minds would wish Harry any harm, and I think, there is a massive, massive case from getting police protection. Don't get me wrong. But has he brought a lot of this upon himself? I mean, before, Harry was an incredibly popular individual when the popularity polls were done about him, and then he decided to stick two fingers up to Britain and Brits on the way out, and then on top of that, he's massively ramped up the Islamist threat by virtue of revealing how many members of the Taliban he killed, and then describing them as chess pieces. And I'm sorry, but has he done this a bit to himself in terms of the threat?
Well, yes, I agree with you. I think he has. Sadly, I think he has. I was one of many people who was thrilled to bits at that wedding when he married Meghan Markle. I thought, this is wonderful. This represents, a complex cosmopolitan nation that we are now, citizens of the world. That's wonderful. And obviously, I still wish them individually the best. But I think he and his wife have behaved very poorly. And I think they've brought a great deal of this on themselves. And I'm very sad. I'm one of those people who is very, very saddened by what's happened since the high days and the happiness of the wedding all those years ago now. So I think he has brought a great deal of this on himself. So I would make the position that I have for constitutional protection reasons, but I have to say I would put myself in the camp of people who are deeply disappointed with Harry. Deeply disappointed. And I have to say that.
OK, I've got loads of emails in on this. Stay on the line for me, if that's all right. Alan, rather hilariously, I would say, actually, Alan has said we should get police protection from Prince Harry, which I think is quite funny. We've also got a load of you saying that, no, we don't think he should get it. He's virtually abdicated. This is from Billy. He's virtually abdicated, so he should pay for it himself. Harry should not be allowed armed protection, even if he pays for it. He has no constitutional role in the coronation. If he pays for it, he opens up the door for any other celeb to pay the Met to have armed protection, armed police and not for hire. That's from Mel, and that's an interesting view, actually, because what happens whenever George Clooney walks over here? Can he pay the Met and take bobbies off our beat over here and end up getting armed protection, I suppose, is that one? I'm just going to ask you something a bit different on this topic now. Have you heard about the fact that Meghan Markle is reportedly thinking of suing Netflix? Not Netflix, gosh, South Park, so I'll get it right in the end. South Park, over this quite witty takedown of them. You've mentioned that he's a spare. His book was called Spare. South Park called it Where, which I thought was quite funny. Do you think that this lot just absolutely can't take a joke? When did Harry start taking himself so seriously?
I think it is really very sad. I think he's got a damaged young man. Sounds like Meghan is as well. And I think, in many ways, that the whole reaction with people does show a great deal of damage, I think. And I feel really, really sorry for them. I genuinely do. And I pray for their healing. But I do also think that they do need to take themselves less seriously. They do need to think about what they can do to repair damage. If you want to create harmony in a family, healing in a family, it takes both sides. I'm sure things have happened on the other side. I'm absolutely sure that's the case. I've no doubt about that. Dysfunction can happen on both sides. But I think what they've done is they've deepened it. And basically, you don't negotiate your way back into a healing situation by megaphone diplomacy. And I think that's the tragedy of what they've done. Megaphone diplomacy does not heal any family split. So, yeah, I would say protect them for constitutional reasons. I wish them no harm whatsoever, of course. But I do feel they have brought a great deal of this on themselves. Yes, I do. And I'm very saddened by it.
The irony here is that the constitutional reasons, and I appreciate what you're saying, absolutely, of protecting this guy because of where he is in line to the throne, despite the fact that he has done, some would say, so much to damage the institution of the monarchy. But I take your point on board. Martin, thank you. Really enjoyed that. Martin Whittock, the historian and licensed lay minister for the Church of England, reacting to the news that 37% of Brits think Prince Harry should pay for his own police protection. Now, into this inbox, because shortly I'm going to be going live to Warsaw in Poland to hear from Joe Biden. It is surprisingly taking him rather a long time to shuffle up to that podium, apparently. But I want to know from you, do you think now that there should be a penny more sent to Ukraine? Americans are increasingly becoming angry about the amount of money their president is sending over there. We had Liz Truss chime in today saying fighter jets. We had Boris Johnson previously saying fighter jets. Christine's been on to me, and Christine says, no, enough is enough. Our own people are struggling. But then just 2 emails above her. I've got one from Richard, who says, definitely keep sending money to Ukraine. Where do we go from here, ladies and gentlemen? That's what I want to know. And off the back of President Biden talking and presumably promising something as well, I'm going to be asking whether or not, we'll have a debate on this, whether or not we should be sending a single penny more to Ukraine. There are very, very strong views on both sides of that. Get yours coming in now, and I can put those views to our debaters. And for those of you watching on TV, you can actually see now, as thousands of people are gathering to watch this eagerly anticipated speech by President Biden, who, and of course it comes after as well, doesn't it? President Putin delivered a State of the Nation address in Moscow. He claimed that Ukraine has become hostage of the Kiev regime and its Western masters, which have effectively occupied the country. Now, Downing Street, for what it's worth, they said that they will not waver in their support for Ukraine. Sunak is under pressure to do more to aid the defence of Ukraine. Liz Truss, Boris Johnson, they're banging on about fighter jets all the time, aren't they? Joe Biden, he's going to chime in. It is amazing, actually, when you think about it, that last year Great Britain was second only to America when it came to funding for Ukraine. Roughly, somewhere in the region of around £12 billion went to Ukraine. But we're about to be confronted by a big decision, ladies and gents, because financial and economic numbers are dropping in this country, which show that it doesn't look like we're going to go into a recession. Great news, fantastic. So the economic crash and the Armageddon might not happen. So it looks like we might have a bit more money in our pockets. It looks like we might have a big tax surplus. We've got workers going out on strike everywhere you look. We've got nurses, we've got doctors, we've got the backbone of this country. They're out striking. And we are telling them, as a government, we're saying we haven't got the money for you. We can't give you a pay rise, OK? We've got a cost of living crisis, and we're saying that we cannot give people a pay rise. Can't help people too much anyway with their heating and stuff. And then the government is potentially about to sit on an extra 30 billion quid they found down the back of the couch because our economy was doing better than thought. What if that money, that extra 30 billion quid, goes to Ukraine and not us? Joe Biden is now live, the President of the United States of America, in Warsaw, walking out to greet the thousands of people in Warsaw who have been waiting eagerly for him. You can hear the music there, playing his entrance music as people to rapturous applause. He is expected to announce and give a very bombastic account of his support for Ukraine. He has promised them a heck of a lot of money, including around $500 million more money. It's money on top of money, and we're going to hear him now, President Biden.
One of our great allies, President Duda, Prime Minister, Mr. Mayor, to all the former ministers and presidents, as well as mayors and Polish political leaders from all across the country. Thank you for welcoming back to Poland. You know, it was nearly 1 year ago. Nearly 1 year ago, I spoke at the Royal Castle here in Warsaw, just weeks after Vladimir Putin had unleashed his murderous assault on Ukraine, the largest land war in Europe since World War II had begun. And the principles that have been the cornerstone of peace, prosperity, and stability on this planet for more than 75 years were at risk of being shattered. 1 year ago, the world was bracing for the fall of Kyiv. Well, I just come from a visit to Kyiv, and I can report Kyiv stands strong. Kyiv stands proud. It stands tall. And most important, it stands free. When Russia invaded, it wasn't just Ukraine being tested. The whole world faced a test for the ages. Europe was being tested. America was being tested. NATO was being tested. All democracies are being tested. And the questions we faced were as simple as they were profound. Would we respond? Or would we look the other way? Would we be strong? Or would we be weak? Would all of our allies, would be united or divided? 1 year later, we know the answer. We did respond. We would be strong. We would be united. And the world would not look the other way. We also face fundamental questions about the commitment to the most basic of principles. Would we stand up for the sovereignty of nations? Would we stand up for the right of people to live free from naked aggression? Would we stand up for democracy? 1 year later, we know the answers. Yes, we would stand up for sovereignty, and we did. Yes, we would stand up for the right of people to live free from aggression, and we did. And we would stand up for democracy, and we did. And yesterday, I had the honor to stand with President Zelensky in Kyiv to declare that we will keep standing up for these same things, no matter what. When President Putin ordered his tanks to roll into Ukraine, he thought we would roll over. He was wrong. The Ukrainian people are too brave. America, Europe, a coalition of nations from the Atlantic to the Pacific, we were too unified. Democracy was too strong. Instead of an easy victory he perceived and predicted, Putin left with burnout tanks and Russia's forces in disarray. He thought he'd get the Finlandization of NATO. Instead, he got the NATOization of Finland and Sweden. He thought NATO would fracture and divide. Instead, NATO is more united and more unified than ever before. He thought he could weaponize energy to crack your resolve, Europe's resolve. Instead, we're working together to end Europe's dependence on Russian fossil fuels. He thought autocrats like himself were tough and leaders of democracy were soft. And then he met the iron will of America and the nations everywhere that refused to accept the world governed by fear and force. He found himself at war with a nation led by a man whose courage would be forged in fire and steel, President Zelensky. President Putin is confronted with something today that he didn't think was possible a year ago. The democracies of the world have grown stronger, not weaker. But the autocrats of the world have grown weaker, not stronger. Because in the moments of great upheaval and uncertainty, that knowing what you stand for is most important. And knowing who stands with you makes all the difference. The people of Poland know that. You know that. In fact, you know it better than anyone here in Poland. Because that's what solidarity means. Through partition and oppression, when the beautiful city was destroyed after the Warsaw Uprising, during decades under the iron fist of communist rule, Poland endured because you stood together. That's how brave leaders of the opposition and the people of Belarus continue to fight for their democracy. That's how the resolve of Moldovan people, the resolve of the people of Moldova to live in freedom, gained them independence and put them on the path to EU membership. President Sandu is here today. I'm not sure where she is, but I'm proud to stand with you and the freedom-loving people of Moldova. Give her a round of applause. 1 year into this war, Putin no longer doubts the strength of our coalition, but he still doubts our conviction. He doubts our staying power. He doubts our continued support for Ukraine. He doubts whether NATO can remain unified. But there should be no doubt. Our support for Ukraine will not waver. NATO will not be divided, and we will not tire. President Putin's craven lust for land and power will fail, and the Ukrainian people's love for their country will prevail. Democracies of the world will stand guard over freedom today, tomorrow, and forever. So that's what's at stake here, freedom. That's the message I carried to Kyiv yesterday, directly to the people of Ukraine. When President Zelensky said he came to the United States in December, quote, he said, this struggle will define the world and what our children and grandchildren, how they live, and then their children and grandchildren. He wasn't only speaking about the children and grandchildren of Ukraine. He was speaking about all of our children and grandchildren, yours and mine. We're seeing again today what the people of Poland and the people across Europe saw for decades. Appetites of the autocrat cannot be appeased. They must be opposed. Autocrats only understand one word: no, no, no. No, you will not take my country. No, you will not take my freedom. No, you will not take my future. And I'll repeat tonight what I said last year in the same place. A dictator bent on rebuilding an empire will never be able to ease the people's love of liberty. Brutality will never grind down the will of the free. And Ukraine will never be a victory for Russia. Never. For free people refuse to live in a world of hopelessness and darkness. You know, this has been an extraordinary year in every sense. Extraordinary brutality from Russian forces and mercenaries. They've committed depravities, crimes against humanity, without shame or compunction. They've targeted civilians with death and destruction, used rape as a weapon of war, stolen Ukrainian children in an attempt to steal Ukraine's future, bombed train stations, maternity hospitals, schools, and orphanages. No one can turn away their eyes from the atrocities Russia is committing against the Ukrainian people. It's abhorrent. It's abhorrent. But extraordinarily, as well, has been the response of the Ukrainian people and the world. 1 year after the bombs began to fall, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine. Ukraine is still independent and free. From Kherson to Kharkiv, Ukrainian fighters have reclaimed their land. More than 50% of the territory Russia held last year. The blue and the yellow flag of Ukraine proudly waves once again. President Zelensky still leads a democratically elected government that represents the will of the Ukrainian people. And the world has already voted multiple times, including the United Nations General Assembly, to condemn Russia's aggression and support a just peace. Each time in the UN, that vote has been overwhelming. In October, 143 nations of the United Nations condemned Russia's illegal annexation. Only four 4 in the entire UN voted with Russia. 4. So tonight, I speak once more to the people of Russia. The United States and the nations of Europe do not seek to control or destroy Russia. The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy. This war is never a necessity. It's a tragedy. President Putin chose this war. Every day the war continues is his choice. He could end the war with a word. It's simple. If Russia stopped invading Ukraine, it would end the war. If Ukraine stopped defending itself against Russia, it would be the end of Ukraine. That's why together we're making sure Ukraine can defend itself. The United States has assembled a worldwide coalition of more than 50 nations to get critical weapons and supplies to the brave Ukrainian fighters on the front lines. Air defense systems, artillery, ammunition, tanks, armored vehicles. The European Union and its member states have stepped up with unprecedented commitment to Ukraine, not just in security assistance, but economic and humanitarian refugee assistance and so much more. To all of you here tonight, take a moment, and I'm serious when I say this. Turn around and look at one another. Look at what you've done so far. Poland is hosting more than 1.5 million refugees from this war. God bless you. Poland's generosity, your willingness to open your hearts and your homes is extraordinary. And the American people are united in our resolve as well. All across my country, in big cities and small towns, Ukrainian flags fly from American homes. Over the past year, Democrats and Republicans in our United States Congress have come together to stand for freedom. That's who Americans are, and that's what Americans do. The world is also coming together to address the global fallout from President Putin's war. Putin tried to starve the world, blocking the ports in the Black Sea to stop Ukraine from exporting its grain, exacerbating the global food crisis that hit developing nations in Africa especially hard. Instead, the United States and the G7 and partners around the world answered the call with historic commitments to address the crisis and to bolster global food supplies. And this week, my wife, Jill Biden, is traveling to Africa to help bring attention to this critical issue. Our commitment is to the people of Ukraine and the future of Ukraine, a Ukraine that's free, sovereign, and democratic. That was the dream of those who declared Ukraine's independence more than 30 years ago, who led the Orange Revolution and the Revolution of Dignity, who braved ice and fire in the Maidan, and the Heavenly Hundred who died there, and those who continue still to root out Kremlin's efforts to corrupt, coerce, and control. It's a dream for those Ukrainian patriots who fought for years against Russia's aggressions in the Donbass, and the heroes who've given everything, given their lives in the service of their beloved Ukraine. I was honored to visit their memorial in Kyiv yesterday, to pay tribute to the sacrifice of those who lost their lives, standing alongside President Zelensky. The United States and our partners stand with Ukraine's teachers, its hospital staff, its emergency responders, the workers in cities across Ukraine are fighting to keep the power on in the face of Russia's cruel bombardment. We stand with the millions of refugees of this war who found a welcome in Europe and the United States, particularly here in Poland. Ordinary people all across Europe did whatever they could to help and continue to do so. Polish businesses, civil society, cultural leaders, including the First Lady of Poland, who is here tonight, have led with the heart and determination, showcasing all that's good about the human spirit. Madam First Lady, we love you. Thank you all. I'll never forget last year visiting with refugees from Ukraine who had just arrived in Warsaw, seeing their faces, exhausted and afraid, holding their children so close, worrying they might never see their fathers, their husbands, their brothers, their sisters again. In that darkest moment of their lives, you, the people of Poland, offered them safety and light. You embraced them. You literally embraced them. I watched the looks on their faces. Meanwhile, together we made sure that Russia is paying the price for its abuses. We continue to maintain the largest sanction regime ever imposed in any country in history. And we're going to announce more sanctions this week together with our partners. We'll hold accountable those who are responsible for this war, and we'll seek justice for the war crimes and crimes against humanity continuing to be committed by the Russians. You know, there is much for us to be proud of over all that we have achieved together this past year. But we have to be honest and clear-eyed as we look at the year ahead. The defense of freedom is not the work of a day or of a year. It's always difficult. It's always important. As Ukraine continues to defend itself against the Russian onslaught and launch counteroffensive of its own, there will continue to be hard and very bitter days, victories and tragedies. But Ukraine is steel for the fight ahead. And the United States, together with our allies and partners, are going to continue to have Ukraine's back as it defends itself. Next year, I will host every member of NATO for our 2024 summit in the United States. Together, we'll celebrate the 75th anniversary of the strongest defensive alliance in the history of the world, NATO. And let there be no doubt, the commitment of the United States to our NATO alliance and Article 5 is rock solid. And every member of NATO knows it, and Russia knows it as well. An attack against one is an attack against all. It's a sacred oath. Sacred oath to defend every inch of NATO territory. Over the past year, the United States has come together with our allies and partners in an extraordinary coalition to stand against Russian aggression. But the work in front of us is not just what we're against. It's about what we're for. What kind of world do we want to build? We need to take the strength and capacity of this coalition and apply it to lifting up the lives of people everywhere, improving health, growing prosperity, preserving the planet, building peace and security, treating everyone with dignity and respect. That's our responsibility. The democracies of the world have to deliver it for our people. As we gather tonight, the world, in my view, is at an inflection point. The decisions we make over the next 5 years or so are going to determine and shape our lives for decades to come. That's true for Americans. It's true for the people of the world. And while decisions are ours to make now, the principles and the stakes are eternal. The choice between chaos and stability, between building and destroying, between hope and fear, between democracy that lifts up the human spirit and the brutal hand of the dictator who crushes it, between nothing less than limitation and possibilities. The kind of possibilities that come when people who live not in captivity but in freedom. 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 There is no sweeter word than freedom. There is no nobler goal than freedom. There's no higher aspiration than freedom. Americans know that, and you know it. And all that we do now must be done so our children and grandchildren will know it as well. Freedom. The enemy of the tyrant and the hope of the brave and the truth of the ages. Freedom. Stand with us. We will stand with you. Let us move forward with faith and conviction and with an abiding commitment to be allies, not of darkness but of light, not of oppression but of liberation, not of captivity but, yes, of freedom. May God bless you all. May God protect our troops. And may God bless the heroes of Ukraine and all those who defend freedom around the world. Thank you, Poland. Thank you, thank you, thank you for what you're doing. God bless you all.
OK, ladies and gentlemen, well, that was Joe Biden there, the President of the United States, speaking in front of a crowd of thousands in Warsaw, Poland. Now, we didn't get a lot of detail out of Joe Biden there, apart from the fact that it was a bit of a tub thumper and it was the usual, OK, well, look, we are standing with Ukraine on this. And it is in light of the fact that Joe Biden visited Ukraine yesterday. Worth noting the amount of money that Joe Biden has pledged, around $500 million extra dollars is going to go to Ukraine. $112 billion in total has already been sent to Ukraine. What Joe Biden is saying there is that Putin chose this war. He can end this war whenever he wants to. But what this does for us now, really, is open up a big discussion on this, because we've got today, just hours, really, before Joe Biden took to the stage there, as a show of force and a show of unity, saying, NATO's back, baby. We're not going to let you run roughshod over Ukraine, Vladimir Putin. What we've had over here is Liz Truss coming out and saying that she'd be in favour of fighter jets. Boris Johnson, we know, is in favour of sending fighter jets. I think there was even a quote saying he quite fancies sending all of our fighter jets to Ukraine, which seemed like maybe slightly a strategic error, if you ask me, but there we go. And it's going to open up a discussion for us, which we're going to have shortly, which is, should we actually send a single penny more to Ukraine? Because if we're looking at our own economic finances here in this country, now they're getting better. We're being told that we've, of course, got issues when it comes to the cost of living crisis. We are being told that we can't give public sector workers a pay rise, certainly not anything like the pay rise they want. But then we're also being told economic figures today, aren't we? That, we might avoid a recession. Has there been a bit of growth? Have we got an extra £30 billion left for us to spend? Should we be spending that money right here at home, or actually should we be sending that to Ukraine? Because I think that if that money goes to Ukraine, more and more people are going to be quite angry about it. But loads of you getting in touch just to react straight away off the back of Biden. I mean, Chris has said that he's had to switch off because Joe Biden is not a natural talker. I've got sympathy for you, Chris, although you just emailed in, which implies that you are actually still watching. So there we go. Keep the fight. Keep the faith. Biden is a hypocrite. This is from Phil. He's saying he's talking about sovereignty, but he doesn't particularly enjoy our own sovereignty. Look, we're going to be talking about that, and I am going to be talking about whether or not we should send a penny more to Ukraine. It's black and white, I know, but that's the discussion I'm going to have shortly. A penny more to Ukraine? Possibly not, possibly. And in just a few minutes, crucially, I am going to be hearing from Nigel Farage, because that was the big topic that we were talking about earlier today. Is Rishi Sunak about to sell out the Brexit backing element of his party in favour of being propped up by the Labour Party leader Keir Starmer so that he can get the Northern Ireland deal through? And what will that mean? Talk of cabinet resignations, talk of massive, massive disquiet and discomfort in the back rooms of the Tory party. Nigel Farage will be with me live when I come back. But right now, it's the headlines with Polly.
Good evening. It's 4 minutes past 5 and GB News has the latest news headlines for you. And as you've just been seeing, US President Joe Biden has pledged the United States and NATO's support for Ukraine will not waver a year on from Russia's invasion. Biden was speaking to thousands gathered in the centre of Warsaw, telling the crowds that the Ukrainian people's love of their country will prevail in the war against Russia. It follows talks he held this afternoon with the President of Poland, a day after his surprise visit to Ukraine. The two leaders addressed security issues and growing NATO's presence in Poland.
The United States and the nations of Europe do not seek to control or destroy Russia. The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy. This war is never a necessity. It's a tragedy. President Putin chose this war. Every day the war continues is his choice. He could end the war with a word. It's simple. If Russia stopped invading Ukraine, it would end the war. If Ukraine stopped defending itself against Russia, it would be the end of Ukraine.
Well, that was US President Joe Biden in Warsaw just a few moments ago. And earlier, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Russia's decision to suspend its participation in a nuclear treaty is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. Vladimir Putin made the announcement during a major speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power. Russia has now summoned the US ambassador over what it describes as an aggressive course set by Washington.
Russia does not abandon the treaty, but suspends its participation. Before resuming the discussion of this treaty, we must first understand what do such countries of NATO, like France and Great Britain, aspire to do, and how will we take their strategic arsenals into account?
Well, in news here at home, the media regulator says it's extremely concerned by the actions of two particular broadcasters following comments made by Nicola Bulley's family. Both ITV and Sky News contacted the 45-year-old's relatives after the body was found in the River Wye on Sunday, despite an appeal from the family for privacy. Ofcom has written to both companies asking them to explain themselves. Police are also being criticised over the way they handled the case. Former Met detective Peter Blexley told GB News that he feels the investigation hasn't quite been up to scratch.
They're going to have to take a very long, hard look at how they've conducted all of this, not only the investigation, but very much the communication. And I hope that the wider British police take some lessons from all of this, because quite frankly, if you get the messaging wrong and people don't believe you, they're not going to trust your investigations. And that, I think, is part of the reason why so many people turned up at St Michael's on Wye.
A former Conservative MP jailed for sexually assaulting a teenager has been freed from prison after serving half his term. Imran Ahmed Khan was jailed for 18 months last May for groping a 15-year-old boy after a party in 2008. The 49-year-old lost a Court of Appeal challenge against his conviction and sentence in December. Consumer news and supermarkets are expanding the list of fruits and vegetables that they'll be limiting for sale. Asda is one supermarket that's going to be rationing customers to a maximum of 3 items from a list of 8, which includes tomatoes, broccoli and raspberries. Morrisons will also be introducing similar restrictions from Wednesday. Bad weather across Europe and Africa is being blamed for the disruption in supply chains, retailers warning it could last for weeks. The UK's chief medical officer has criticised the marketing of vapes. Sir Chris Whitty described them as appalling, saying it's clear some products are designed to appeal to children. Research published last July found the number of young people vaping is increasing, with many being influenced by social media. And finally, we're hearing the head coach of Wales' national rugby team has described possible strike action by his players as a genuine threat. The dispute between players and the Professional Rugby Board is over a new contract, with players saying they don't have long-term certainty. And with just 4 days to go before Wales's clash against England in the Six Nations, there are concerns now that a solution hasn't yet been reached. Talks are due to be held tomorrow, and Warren Gatland said he's confident the game will go ahead. Fingers crossed. That's all from us on the GB News Bulletins team for now. Let's get back to Patrick.
OK, people, welcome back. Right, now, there has been massive talk about huge levels of discomfort and disquiet in the Tory party. Cabinet resignation watch is well and truly on the go. Will Suella Braverman stand down if she's not happy about this deal that Rishi Sunak supposedly wants signed in relation to Northern Ireland? Other hardline Brexiteers, it would appear, as well, potentially on the ropes, Steve Baker and others to add to that list. Is Rishi Sunak potentially going to sell out the Brexiteer backing elements of his own party, in order to get something through, to cosy up to the European Union, and with it as well massively strengthen Sir Keir Starmer's stance to be the next Prime Minister of the United Kingdom by allowing him to wave this through? big debates about whether or not anyone will go. But another question for me, frankly, is that are the Eurosceptic wings of the Conservative Party being sold down the river? And if they are, where do they go? Joining me now to talk about this is GB News presenter. It's Nigel Farage. Nigel, thank you very much. Sorry, we were held up by Joe Biden there, not the only people to be held up by him. But look, your take on this. Do you reckon that Rishi Sunak is going to sell out the ERG?
Well, look, he won't call this a sellout. He will say that the agreement he's reached with the European Union is significantly better than that was agreed by Boris Johnson. And actually, in terms of a deal itself, he'll be right, because at least with a green channel for goods that are going from the mainland into Northern Ireland and not on to the Republic, if it genuinely is a green lane, that would be a significant improvement on the mess of where we are now. Now, there is, of course, this potential legislation on the table that says we could just scrap the whole thing. There's not a cat's chance in hell of him and Hunt doing that. I don't think Boris Johnson himself either would ever have pulled that trigger. And he will gamble, Sunak will gamble, that however much the sabres may be rattled, at the end of the day, most Conservatives are not as brave when it comes to going through the lobby on a three-line whip as they are in the weeks leading up to it. And he will gamble that there won't actually be any cabinet resignations. That's my take.
Yeah, so this could be it. Do you think he'll basically say to them, look, if you decide that you're going to resign, well, you can wave goodbye to the Tories being in charge at the next election, and that's already pretty shaky. So do you think that actually Suella Braverman, etc., Steve Baker will talk a good game, but they will stand firm?
Well, Steve Baker, I mean, you know, he resigns one day and he's back the next. I mean, I wouldn't worry about him too much. There'll be huge pressure on Suella Braverman, particularly from the Eurosceptic wing, and she's a very, very genuine Eurosceptic in every regard. But do I see her giving up the job of Home Secretary over the fact that the ECJ have a continued role? I wouldn't have thought so. No, I really wouldn't have thought so. There'll be the usual 30 or 40 backbenchers. I don't see this turning out into an all-out rebellion. I really, really don't.
Does the Conservative Party actually stand for traditional Conservative values anymore, Nigel?
I've no idea, Patrick, what it stands for. Literally no idea whatsoever, and nor do most of them. All I do know is they believe in the big state. The state must intervene in every aspect of our lives. The state knows best. Individual personal responsibility is out of the window. And frankly, you know, you can't really differentiate much now between them and Keir Starmer's Labour Party, especially now that Corbyn has really been cast out. And we're just in this high tax, low growth, not breaking away from the European Union, open border immigration. I mean, frankly, for people like me, the whole thing is very, very depressing indeed.
I can imagine you could fit a Rizzler paper between the two main parties. Nigel, I'll just leave you by asking this. What have we got coming up on your show?
Well, we're going to be talking tonight very much about what Putin had to say earlier on today and whether there's actually any end in sight for this war at all. On the one hand, we have Truss and Johnson, both of whom seem to want to send the entire RAF to go and support President Zelensky. On the other, we have escalating language over nuclear arms limitation treaties from Putin, and it looks to me like we're in for a very, very long war that'll last many, many years. And the risk of escalation, I think, becomes more real with each day.
Nigel, thank you very much. It'll be gripping stuff as ever. Nigel Farage there. Make sure that you catch him coming up live on your TV screens and on your radios from 7 p.m. Right, OK, look, as we've just heard in the last few minutes from President Joe Biden, he was speaking in Warsaw. The US president warned Russia that tougher sanctions in response to the invasion of Ukraine would come this week. He also praised Western nations for putting on a united front. It was a bit of a tub-thumping speech, wasn't well, as far as Joe Biden can deliver. It was a touching speech, really, saying that NATO is now more united than ever. Liz Truss, as you just heard from Nigel Farage there, Liz Truss and Boris Johnson, they're demanding UK supplies Ukraine with fighter jets on top of the £2.3 billion worth of military aid that's already been given. You can add that to all the other aid that we've given them as well, and you're in the realms of it being around £12 billion. You are watching on your screens there Volodymyr Zelensky walking up to the steps of Downing Street with Rishi Sunak. That was from the latest trip for Volodymyr Zelensky, where he turned up, of course, and essentially thanked us in advance for fighter jets, which we had not yet given them, before he went around the European Union and asked them for the very same thing. But with some analysts predicting a long war, growing problems at home as well, should we continue to actually send money to Ukraine? There's massive, massive annoyance around America at the minute as Joe Biden, yet to visit the site of quite a big disaster in America, by the way, that's taken place recently with that train crash and the kind of chemical explosion that's taken place there, signing off another $500 million, already $112 billion in total to Ukraine. People there in America are saying, well, what about us at home here, Joe? And people are starting to say that right here now. How on earth can we have the money to keep sending it over to Ukraine when we have people here who can't afford a pay rise? But then Gary makes a great point before I go to my guest, and I want to get this across, because this really is where the debate is. Gary on the inbox says, Patrick, you're talking about saving pennies. Joe Biden is talking about freedom. And that is the most priceless commodity. And that is where a lot of people are. Loads of you are saying we have to keep funding Ukraine. I just want to know whether or not we should send them a single penny more. With me now is Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams, who's a NATO historian, journalist and an ex-reserve officer. Look, thank you very, very much. Should we send Ukraine a penny more?
We should send them whatever it costs and for however long this goes on. We can't look into the future and know how long this war will go on, but I think the approved wisdom at the moment is that it's going to go on for months, if not years. And can you put a cost on freedom? You know, we have a moral responsibility to help these people.
Well, this is the thing.
And you're trying to put a price on it.
Well, I am trying to put a price on it, because when you have people over here who will feel as though they can't get a pay rise at all and our public services are in the toilet and people are choosing between heating and eating, and then all of a sudden our economy potentially does better than expected, maybe a growth, not recession, maybe we have an extra 30 billion quid to play with, and then they see that 30 billion quid going to Kiev and not Crewe or somewhere. I mean, you could rebuild Crewe for 30 billion quid, to be fair, but the people, I think, would have a right to wonder whether or not a government is acting in its own best national interest. Your thoughts on that?
Well, let's give this some context. President Biden in Kiev yesterday was very like President John F. Kennedy in Berlin in June 1963, sort of standing up to the Russian threat in the middle of the Cold War. And this is, we're back in a new Cold War. And a significant proportion of the UK GDP went to preserving freedom, partly in terms of UK armaments and the armed forces, but also aid to our compatriots and colleagues overseas. And that's where we are again. And nobody in those days sort of said, you remember the winter of discontent. This was the same sort of time. No one in those days sort of said it's either or. And, you know, this is the real world we're in. It's got to be both.
Okay.
We owe these people who are freezing and starving just the same as some people in the United Kingdom all the moral and physical help that we can give them. But we have to look after our own population. But it's not either or. It can't be.
Well, a lot of people, I think, are becoming increasingly uncomfortable about very, very, very high-stakes decisions being made behind closed doors. So, let's take fighter jets as an example. Let's say you and I wake up one morning, and by the way, you might think it's the right thing to do. I'm staying out of whether or not I think it's right to send them fighter jets. I'm just saying that if we were to wake up one morning and we sent fighter jets to Ukraine, and Putin reacted to that by saying this is World War III now, the British public would never have had a say on that. The American public would never have had a say on that. And we are already sending over a lot of money. If we continue to do that, and this does result in World War III, the grey men in suits, without consulting me or our viewers or our listeners, conceivably would have made strategic decisions that could have cost us all our lives. And I find that a bit rum.
Right, that's not going to happen. We are nowhere near World War III. We were far closer during the Cold War that ended in 1989, 1990 than we are today. Putin makes all these threats. He made a threat almost a year ago saying he'd put his nuclear forces on extra alert. It never happened. none of the Russian forces in Ukraine have got any MBC equipment. You don't launch nuclear weapons unless you protect your own troops. None of the missiles have gone out on any special exercises. And believe you me, we would know that because our satellites are tracking them all. So there's not a single iota of a move towards that kind of escalation. And all we're doing is talking up the fear factor amongst ourselves, which Putin is very happy about, by saying we're edging closer to World War III. That's not going to happen. Now, the point about men in grey suits going to war, I mean, the United Kingdom, when it declares war, this isn't a sort of open session general election type decision. It's politicians who are dealing with very, very sensitive intelligence that they can't share with us.
No,
So
I get that, but there's normally some sort of vote. Okay, I do understand all this. There's normally some sort, and some of that was very reassuring, actually, to be fair. But there's normally some sort of vote in Parliament. But my concern is that it wouldn't be a vote in Parliament. It would be our actions that politicians take. So sending fighter jets, I don't know if we'd have to vote on that in Parliament. They've not voted on anything else pretty much so far, really, have they? So if they sent a load of fighter jets over there and then that caused massive escalation, this would be my concern, really. And I just wonder whether or not it's becoming increasingly hard to justify. You are of the view that, if I have this right, that the British taxpayer should just strap themselves in. If this goes on for 10 years and it costs us 20 billion quid a year for the next 10 years, we're just going to have to suck it up.
Right. The corollary of that, in other words, what happens if we don't, is that Russia will win in Ukraine. And if Russia wins in Ukraine, it will feel so self-confident to start having a pop at some of the other countries in the vicinity, not necessarily NATO members. And so what we're doing, if we say no to it, all of this, pull the stumps, is we're corrupting ourselves morally. We're undoing everything we've done in the last year.
Okay.
And we are propelling ourselves far quicker towards some kind of international disaster with Russia than we would be if we're helping Ukraine at the moment.
Fair enough.
Because that's the way Putin is heading.
All right, good stuff. Thank you very, very much. Dr. Peter Caddick-Adams there, NATO historian, journalist, ex-reserve officer, answering a lot of those questions there about, frankly, whether or not we should send a single penny more. A couple of people emailing it. Look, there's very much a mixed bag, as there always is with Ukraine in the inbox. Pretty much 50-50. Quite a lot of you saying, look, this is a big waste of money, etc. This might sound horrible, but I don't think we should send them that money. We also have an individual here, Andrew, who says, look, I used to really like you, Patrick, but I've got to admit, I think you're wrong on this. And basically saying the things I support Putin, just to clarify, I absolutely don't. What I am concerned about is the British taxpayer staring down the barrel of massive, massive, massive out-of-control annual payments. And it's having that discussion, isn't it, about how much are you willing to accept when maybe things aren't great at home at the minute. But, yeah, very much a mixed bag, but all views welcome, gbviews at gbnews.uk. We're moving on from that now. We're talking about another one that has proved, yet again, very contentious, actually. ITV have confirmed that they will collaborate with Ofcom's request to explain its actions over the Nicola Bulley case, following comments by her family about the invasive media treatment they received from certain broadcasters after a body was found in the river. The media watchdog said they were extremely concerned about the actions of some outlets in approaching those close to Nicola, but criticism has also been directed towards Lancashire Police for putting sensitive information out there. We all know the score about that. Now, join me now to give us insight from the media perspective on this, or an element of the media perspective, is former newspaper editor and media consultant. It's Neil Wallace. Neil, thank you. I know you've been sat on the line for a while there. Right, so do you think that the likes of Sky and ITV were bang out of order to the point of it being gutter press, that they contacted Nicola's family, allegedly, after a body had been found?
I don't know the exact details. I was very surprised by it. I don't know at what level the contact was made in terms of seniority within ITV or Sky. They're both usually very respectable, reliable broadcasters. But I think this is a very, very complex and frankly unusual situation. When you think that to a certain extent the Bulley family had become very disillusioned with the actions of Lancashire Police. They were desperate for the story not to be true, that she had fallen in the river. Then you had this freelance independent search expert, allegedly, come along, who then stood up publicly and said, she is not in the water. They grasped that with great, understandable relief. And what happened after that, we had 10 days, 2 weeks of just constant headlines about where is she, etc. And that's understandable how that happened. But what you have there is the Bulley family, frankly, they embraced the contact with the media. And they embraced it because it kept the story in the headlines, which is where they wanted. The big problem with this really has been the behaviour, yet again, on social media and the tarring of the regular media to a large extent because of the activity.
It's interesting, Neil. I'm just going to interject here, Neil, if that's all right, because I get that there's a lot of absolute filth on social media. The point I will make to that is there always is. What the Bulley family did was overtly name Sky and ITV. Now, I've got the newspapers in front of me here. I've had them in front of me every day for however long. And it's Nicola Bulley, Nicola Bulley, Nicola Bulley. Now, there's twofold things to that, isn't there? Because the other side of this is public interest. Now, they would not have kept putting the Nicola Bulley story on the front page if it didn't sell newspapers, OK? We would not have continued to talk about it had there not been a big public interest on the inbox, on the clips that we put on social media. I'm certainly not bracketing us in the same bracket, by the way, as Sky and ITV there. So were the press legitimate in going as big as they did on this Nicola Bulley missing persons case? Because actually, were they being fuelled, like it or loathe it, by the amount of people in the public who wanted them to?
There's a certain catch-22 to that, though, isn't there? You know, if your viewers want to watch and eat up every word about this story, then that's what you provide them. Now, you do it in context, you do it in balance, you make sure that what you do is in an appropriate way. But, you know, when you as a TV station, for instance, and the newspapers and all of those other channels are being fed material by the Lancashire police about Nicola Bulley and her private health background, etc., then that's going to fuel the news cycle, isn't it? It just is. And that's been the way of these things. I was very, very surprised that ITV and Sky got it so badly wrong. And I think they will pay a price for that. But you know what? We're all human. Mistakes get made. It was something of a bombshell when it came through that a body had been found, and maybe judgments failed on the day. We're not all perfect. But is the truth of the matter that where the mainstream media was concerned, they were a part of a relationship, if you like, then I think the answer is yes, they were.
Is the sad fact, maybe, that if somebody in a newsroom had not made contact with the family once they knew a body had been found, that maybe they would have been shouted at by their bosses for saying, have you not gone to the family for comment on this? Because they are in a news industry and they want to be able to at least say they've contacted the family to get their views, to get their next headline.
I think that inevitably must be possible. But similarly, on a case this high profile, I would be very, very surprised if a reporter on the ground simply took it upon themselves. Now, whether a reporter on the ground misjudged their relationship with the Bulley family and thought that they had a better, closer, more intimate relationship than they really did, that's a different matter. But that's not the sort of call I would have expected a reporter on a paper, any paper that I work for, to have made off their own bat. They would talk to their bosses first.
All right, look, thank you very, very much, Neil. Or interesting insight, that, I think, into the inner workings of the media landscape. Neil Wallace, though, is a former newspaper editor and media consultant. Right, massively busy day here on GB News. Should Prince Harry have to pay for his own armed protection in the UK? Lots of you, apparently, think he should pay for his own police protection. I will be discussing all of that very shortly.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank, fun, fearless and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
You with GB News? Let's bring you the headlines this hour. And US President Joe Biden says the United States will announce new sanctions against Russia this week. Biden's been speaking to thousands of people gathered in the centre of Warsaw, telling the crowds that the Ukrainian people's love of their country will prevail in the war against Russia. It follows talks he held this afternoon with the President of Poland, a day after his surprise visit to Ukraine. The two leaders addressed security issues and growing NATO's presence in Poland.
The United States and the nations of Europe do not seek to control or destroy Russia. The West was not plotting to attack Russia, as Putin said today. And millions of Russian citizens who only want to live in peace with their neighbors are not the enemy. This war is never a necessity. It's a tragedy. President Putin chose this war.
Well, earlier today, the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken said Russia's decision to suspend its participation in a nuclear treaty is deeply unfortunate and irresponsible. Vladimir Putin made the announcement during a major speech on the war in Ukraine, where he also accused the West of trying to acquire limitless power. Russia has now summoned the US ambassador over what it describes as an aggressive course set by Washington. Here, the Chancellor is under pressure to improve public sector pay rises for workers next month after official figures show state finances are stronger than predicted. The Office for National Statistics has revealed the government reported a monthly surplus of £5.4 billion in January. The surprising number is mainly because of self-assessed income tax. The figures come weeks before Jeremy Hunt will set out his plan for the budget on the 15th of March. And the Princess of Wales has been visiting a nursing home in Berkshire to discover how it cares for the elderly there. Kate recently launched her Shaping Us campaign, which focuses on early years and raising awareness of the first 5 years of a child's life. But this time, she's been learning how those at the end of their lives are supported at the Oxford House nursing home in Slough. The care provided includes supporting the elderly to live independently in their own homes. Those are your latest news headlines. We're back in half an hour. See you then.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Now, a recent YouGov poll has suggested that the majority of Brits think that Prince Harry should receive police protection, but only if he pays for it himself. That's right. The poll also showed that more than a quarter of people thought that the second son of the king shouldn't get any police protection at all. It comes as the Duke of Sussex launched a legal battle with the Home Office over the decision to reduce his protection. Whilst in the UK, the decision was made back in February 2020, shortly after the Duke announced that he was stepping back from royal duties, finding freedom, wasn't he? The legal case has already cost the taxpayer a whopping 300 grand. Joining me now is the former head of Scotland Yard's Royalty Protection Command. It's Di Davies. Di, thank you. Great to have you on the show. First and foremost, does Harry even need armed protection if he's in the UK?
Well, good afternoon. No, unless the threat assessment says he does. And I'd just like to explain, there's a huge process that goes in to actually assessing a threat. It's not only from intelligence in this country, it's also from 5 other countries, which we have a partnership sharing that intelligence. So I can assure you there's a full audit trail that goes in to assessing whether he needs it. And the truth is, he does get it and has got it when, as he came to his grandmother's funeral and his grandfather's funeral, he got it. He will get it if the assessment is there and if and when he is with other royal.
So if he decides to come back for the coronation, there will be a risk assessment done on his behalf, and they will determine whether or not, in their view, he needs armed protection. So really, the situation should be out of his control, because if the highest level of security across numerous different countries decide that Prince Harry does not need armed guards, then he's got a bit of cheek asking for one, hasn't he?
Well, the King's Counsel, actually representing the Home Office, actually used the word arrogant. Right. I also think he's arrogant. I think by his own behaviour and publishing some of the detail inside his book about the internal security of his father's residence, Balmoral, his own. I mean, the word idiot comes to mind, if I'm honest.
Yeah, Di, and, you know, people will say, well, he can surely afford it himself. Is there a bigger issue here about our Metropolitan Police being for hire? So if Prince Harry decided that, well, I'll lob you a load of cash, whoever pays for it, I'll lob you a load of cash, and all of a sudden we've got Met police officers there being his armed guard. I mean, they should be attending to stabbings, they should be attending to domestic abuse cases, they should be attending to everything, really, shouldn't they? And yet Prince Harry, presumably, would be perfectly happy for, at his beck and call, these Met bobbies to be taken off the beat.
Well, they wouldn't be taken off the beat. They're highly trained individuals. But yes, they should go where the threat is actually greatest. Clearly, at the moment, we protect the king, his family, and the future king and his family. The rest of them do get protection on an ad hoc basis as and when required. That's what I'm saying. But there's never, in all the, as far as I know, 300 years of history that I've looked at, there's never been a precedent for an individual paying for royalty protection from the Royalty Protection and VIP Command. It's never been done. That's never to say it shouldn't be done, but in my humble opinion, one, at the moment, it doesn't appear as if he requires it, but I think a period where he keeps his big mouth shut would be advantageous to his own security. But if you look at history, as I have, because I lecture on it, in terms of royalty security, the number of times the royalty protection officers had to, throughout history, pull a gun out and point it at anybody is so small it wouldn't even go on any graph. The truth is, yes, they are armed as and when necessary, but the truth is, if, as I have done, you look at attacks and assassinations throughout history, it is very rare a protection officer pulls his guns out and does need it. So it evidences, in one sense, he doesn't need it. He's got a huge retinue of ex-police officers, some from this country, American ex-special forces. With great respect, he doesn't need the rest of us paying for anything.
No, look, Di, thank you very, very much. That's Di Davies there, who is the former head of Scotland Yard Royalty Protection Command, who's basically saying that, according to him anyway, the risk assessment will be done on Harry, and if they decide that he doesn't need an armed guard, then that's that, frankly, and the Met shouldn't be made to do it, highly trained officers shouldn't be made to do it, taxpayers shouldn't have to pay for it, and indeed it is quite arrogant to ask for it. But there's another royal story that caught my eye. No, it's not the possibility of Meghan Markle potentially suing South Park. No, in fact, it's the fact that Prince Andrew has, and we all shed a tear at this point, I think, ladies and gentlemen, has supposedly fallen on hard times. And how on earth can poor little Andy, he was given a house by the Queen as a wedding present but chose to sell it to a Kazakh billionaire for £15 million in 2007, how can he afford the maintenance of the swimming pool on his aristocratic estate if he stops getting handouts? This is the news now of the crushing reality for Prince Andrew, because supposedly he might have to move out of his lovely, lovely estate in Windsor because supposedly he's going to get cut off by Charles and his £249,000 a year grant, really, maintenance allowance, will be stopped. Well, we have a solution for Prince Andrew. It's something that's been bothering me for a little while, actually, and I decided that the solution for him is probably just to get a job like a normal person. So I'm going to try to tart up Prince Andrew's CV for him, and let's see if we can get Andy a job, people, OK? Suggestions for a job for Prince Andrew, more than welcome, gbviews@gbnews.uk. So I was thinking, right, we know that he doesn't sweat, so he'd be fine operating a furnace. And then that got me thinking again, which is always dangerous, I know, but what kind of place uses a furnace? Pizza parlours, OK? We know he likes a pizza. We know he's a fan of Pizza Express, don't we? And as luck would have it, I was trawling the internet, and there is a job going, and it's live now, this job, as a senior pizza chef at Pizza Express in Kingston upon Thames. He would earn up to £11 an hour, apparently, which is, I think, decent for him, and it comes with perks. So the job advertises that it comes with a free tasty pizza every shift to keep you going, a 50% discount to treat yourself, your friends and your family. Drinks are included. Andy, get the CV in, my man. What else could he do there? What else could he do? So, wow, he's been looking after the Queen's corgis, supposedly, after Her Majesty sadly passed away last year. Well, Good Dogs of London are advertising for a driver and a daycare assistant. £24,000 a year. He'd get a van. He'd get £400 monthly allowance for his own dog. He must speak English to at least a conversational level, though. He literally speaks the Queen's, doesn't he? So I imagine he could just walk them around the grounds. What else? There's probably one more out there, isn't there? What else could he do? What else? Oh, I know. He's a massive fan of international travel, isn't he? Yes, exactly. You don't get a name like Air Miles Andy without globe-trotting just a little smidgen, do you? And he could earn, I think we found a winner here, Andy, he could earn up to £90,000 a year as a worldwide travel agent for Dial a Flight. The ideal candidate, get this, needs to be... These jobs are live now, you can check them out. Needs to be highly motivated, service-orientated, and, of course, will help you build their own customer base. Well, Andrew, he's got to earn a crust, OK? He's done loads of public service, and as we all know, his networking skills are... Oh, I mean, chef's kiss to that. So... time for him to get applying, I think. Not sure how he'd do in the interview. though. But there we go. So, jobs for Andy, anyway. Keep them coming in, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But next, people, the agency responsible for providing COVID test kits for the UK has been accused of letting down the British taxpayer. Find out why. I'll be back in 2.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh my goodness me! And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
And YouView, Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store? You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
All right, so GB News exclusive for you now, people. The agency responsible for securing COVID test kits for the UK has been accused of failing to serve the interests of the British taxpayers. So, the UK Health Security Agency awarded a multi-million-pound government contract to Medco, a global company, but one of Medco's main competitors says that other companies who wanted to provide test kits were ignored. And it's accused the UK Health Security Agency of cronyism, says Brits are now paying more for the kits than they should be. Here is the man himself to talk about this, Charlie Peters. He has the story. Charlie, explain this.
So it's a strong statement from this competitor today, a man called Frederick Fitz-Reiter-Dank, who's a director of suppliers for medical equipment and some gloves. He runs two companies, Novum Group and MB Medtech. He's told GB News today, a very bold statement, that the UK HSA is engaged in cronyism, he believes, in how it's awarding these contracts. They gave £238 million to worth of contract to this company, Medco, last week, to run from yesterday, February the 20th, until August the 20th, in supplying lateral flow tests. Now, more controversially with this issue is that Fitz-Reiter-Dank, this competitor, and dozens of other suppliers have been applying for the same contract since it went up in June the 13th of last year. So over 6 months, they've not been evaluated on this thing called a dynamic pricing system. In 2021, the average time to be evaluated was just under 2 weeks. Now, it's been well over 6 months. A lot of these companies are saying, well, why weren't we looked at? Why weren't we assessed? So this competitor, he spoke to me earlier. He said that cronyism makes it near impossible to break into central procurement, which is underpinned by personal relationships. So very strong terms here. The Health Security Agency obviously got back to us on this.
Yes.
They gave us a statement.
I think we've got a statement, actually, haven't we?
Now,
yeah.
So they picked out, in particular, the issue that they were extending a contract they already had, but of course the competitors said, well, why didn't you come to us and ask us for our input on this? And they also went on to say that these evaluations have taken place over a two-stage process and that because they've got enough for now, they're not going to continue to evaluate anyone else, and they're pausing these evaluations for other companies. Now, that's news to these suppliers. They've been applying for 6 months. They've been asking for the agency to get back to them and ask them for the standard of their testing, and they've heard nothing. So this is the first time, I think, that the agency has announced on this particular pricing system, on this application, that they're pausing them. Now, what is the effect on the taxpayer for this as we hook this story? Well, a lot of these competitors think that it might be making things more expensive. We know, for example, that Lithuania, a competitor in the EU for purchasing tests, its most efficient bid was 44 pence per test.
Right.
By contrast, in Britain, the most efficient bid we've ever had is 95 pence a test. So 117% increase on the most efficient Lithuanian bid. Is that being caused by poor procurement? Well, the debate is still on that.
The debate is still on, but look, Charlie, thank you very much for bringing us that. Yet another exclusive there from Charlie Peters. Thank you so much. Right, there'll be more on that, no doubt. We won't be letting that one go. But Michael Gove, moving on, has been levelling up the dance floor in his hometown of Aberdeen. Not for the first time. He was videoed in a 1980s-themed club throwing shapes with a dance partner. I believe we can have a look at him in action. Fantastic. Oh, got me going. Look at that, eh? There you go. But he's not the first MP to show us their moves. Can I just say, it does appear a lot like whenever Michael Gove goes to Aberdeen, he has an absolute cracker of a time, because there was a time before, wasn't there, not so long ago, where he was on the dance floor cutting shapes as well. But yes, he's not the first MP to show us their moves. I thought, who better to talk to, about MPs and dancing and, you know, being in the public eye, the former Conservative minister and Strictly Come Dancing superstar is Anne Widdecombe. Anne, thank you very much. Well, look, what would Len Goodman or whoever is on the panel of Strictly Come Dancing these days have given Michael Gove for his moves there, do you think?
Oh, I think he'd probably have got about 3. He would certainly have got more than I ever did, but I used to get 1. So I think Michael would probably have got about 3.
Yeah, OK. Now, actually, for a bit of context here, Anne, before I get you to comment a bit more, we could have a little look at your... And can I just say you were robbed, because you were my favourite, your performances on Strictly Come Dancing. So I think we've got a little clip, have we? Oh, and you were such a good sport, weren't you? But do you not think there is something good? More politicians should do more normal people things, like going out on a dance floor on a night out or something like that, Anne?
Well, you certainly don't want to do Strictly Come Dancing while you're still a serving MP, that's for a certainty. But I don't see any reason why an MP shouldn't just go out on a Friday or Saturday night and dance just like the rest of the population does. The problem is, if you're an MP, and particularly if you're a high-profile MP and you do that, you can absolutely guarantee that it's going to be on everybody's social media the next day. So beware.
And would you ever entertain the idea of even maybe, you know, being my dance partner one evening?
With all due respect, Patrick, I'm sure that if there was anybody that I would like to dance with more, it would only be Anton Dupek. It wouldn't be anybody else. But nevertheless, I think my club hopping days are behind me.
I can't help but believe that I've just been turned down by Anne Widdecombe. But thank you very much. Look, and you take care. You're always such a good sport, and I'm sorry this is short and sweet, but I've really enjoyed every second of it. You take care, Anne. Anne Widdecombe, they're regular here on GB News, Strictly Come Dancer, former Conservative MP as well. You've been with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. I thought we'd lighten it up a little bit at the end there. Emily Carver joins you next. She's filling in for Michelle Dewberry. See you tomorrow at 3.
Good afternoon, I'm Alex Deakin, and this is your latest weather update from the Met Office. Bit of rain around tomorrow, haven't seen much of that so far this month. Some spots will brighten up. I think we'll all notice a colder feel. At the moment, very mild between these two weather fronts, but here comes a cold front. Overnight and tomorrow, that pushes across the country and introduces chillier weather. It's not going to be especially cold, but as I say, you will notice the difference. It's also going to bring some rain this evening into western Scotland and Northern Ireland. That cold front will then spread some rain into western parts of England and across Wales during the early hours. A few showers are possible across the east, particularly the southeast, but many eastern parts of England will stay dry. It'll be a mild one for most as well, but as that cold front clears, late in the night we could get down to 2 or 3 in the northwest, so that colder weather is moving in.